Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the Dragon God Slayer, the progenitor of A.L.L. Slayer's Naruto x Erza Scarlet fairy tale. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Beyond the Veil. The moonlight painted silvery threads across the ancient stone monuments of the Valley of the End. Naruto Uzumaki stood atop the massive stone head of Hashirama Senju, Hi's blonde hair ruffling in the night breeze. At 20, he'd grown taller, leaner, his features sharpened by war and tempered by peace. The familiar weight of his crimson sage cloak settled around his shoulders, emblazoned with black flames along its hem, a gift from the toads of Mount Myoboku. 3 years had passed since the Fourth Great Ninja War. 3 years since he and Sasuke had sealed away Kagaya. 3 years of rebuilding, of diplomatic missions, of a hard-won peace that sometimes felt more fragile than the surface of still water. And now, something was disturbing that peace. Anything yet? Shikamaru's voice crackled through the communication device in his ear. Naruto closed his eyes, extending his senses outward. The natural energy flowed around him, through him, highlighting T. He whirled in vivid detail even without sight. Nothing obvious, but something feels wrong. Wrong how? Shikamaru pressed. Like the air is thinner here. Like reality itself is stretched. Naruto opened his eyes, activating his six paths sage mode. Golden chakra illuminated the night around him, his skin taking on a subtle glow. With enhanced perception, he scanned the valley below. For weeks, reports had filtered into Konoha. Unusual chakra disturbances, moments where space seemed to ripple, animals behaving strangely. Most dismissed them as aftereffects of the war. The world still adjusts to the massive chakra expenditures that had warped battlefields. But Naruto knew better. He'd felt it himself. Moments where his connection to Kurama flickered, where the natural energy he gathered in sage mode seemed to pull in unfamiliar directions. Sasuke said he found something similar in the Land of Iron. Naruto continued, leaping down from the monument to inspect a section of the cliff face. Places where the barrier between something feels thin. Between what and what? Shikamaru sounded frustrated, and Naruto couldn't blame him. It was difficult to describe sensations that had no precedent. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Kurama feels it too. Inside him, the nine-tailed fox stirred. It's old magic, Kurama rumbled. Older than the Sage of Six Paths. Older than me. Naruto paused, his fingers tracing over a section of stone that felt unusually warm beneath his touch. Kurama says it's some kind of ancient magic. Predates even him. Magic, not chakra. Shikamaru's skepticism was evident. That's what he called it. Naruto frowned as his fingers detected subtle vibrations in the stone. I'm going to investigate closer. Something's definitely here. Be careful, Naruto, Kurama warned. This doesn't feel like our world. The stone beneath Naruto's fingertips began to glow with faint blue symbols, characters in a language he didn't recognize. They spiraled outward from his touch, illuminating a circular pattern nearly 5 meters in diameter. Shikamaru, are you seeing this? Naruto stepped back, staring at the glowing sigils. Seeing what? The transmission is breaking up. The communication device emitted a high-pitched whine, then fell silent. Naruto pulled it from his ear with a wince. The symbols were pulsing now, their glow intensifying with each beat. Naruto, move away from there. Now. Kurama's voice held an unfamiliar edge, not anger, but something closer to fear. But Naruto hesitated. If this was the source of the disturbances, he needed to understand it. He created a shadow clone with a quick hand sign, sending it forward to examine the symbols more closely while he maintained distance. The clone crouched, tracing one glowing line with cautious fingers. These aren't sealing jutsu marks, the clone called back. They're not like any chakra script I've. The clone's words cut short as the entire pattern flared with blinding light. Naruto felt a surge of the clone's memories, burning sensation, pulling force, before it dispersed in a puff of smoke. The stone wall was no longer solid, it had become a swirling vortex of blue-white energy. What the hell? Naruto stepped backward, preparing to retreat and report, when the vortex expanded suddenly, engulfing the area where he stood. He sensation was unlike any transportation jutsu he'd experienced, worse than being pulled through Kamui's dimension, more disorientating than the Rinnegan's teleportation. It felt as though every atom of his body was being unraveled, examined, and reassembled imperfectly. Pain lanced through him, and he heard Kurama roaring in protest. Our chakra is being separated. Fight it, Naruto. He tried to form a Rasengan, to disrupt whatever force had caught him, but his chakra refused to coalesce. The golden aura of Six Paths Sage Mode flickered and died. He felt Kurama's chakra being pulled away from his own, stretching the seal that bound them. Kurama. Naruto reached inward, grasping desperately for the connection they shared. Don't let go. The fox snarled, his chakra claws digging into Naruto's own energy. Whatever happens, don't. The world exploded into fragments of light and darkness. Naruto felt himself falling through nothingness, then through something that felt like water, then air again. His lungs burned. His skin felt scorched and frozen simultaneously. And throughout it all, he held onto Kurama's chakra with desperate determination. The void around him tore open, and suddenly he was falling through actual air, plummeting toward a forest canopy that rushed up to meet him with alarming speed. He managed to gather just enough chakra to cushion his fall, crashing through branches before slamming into the ground with bone-jarring force. For several minutes, Naruto could only lie there, gasping. Every muscle trembled. His chakra network felt raw, as it had been scraped with sandpaper. When he finally managed to push himself to his knees, a wave of nausea overtook him, and he retched until his stomach was empty. Kurama, he called mentally, reaching for the familiar presence. Relief washed through him at the fox's answering growl, though it sounded distant and weak. I'm here. Barely. What happened? Where are we? Not where. When and what? Kurama's voice was strained. This isn't our world, Naruto. The energy here is completely different. I can feel it trying to convert our chakra. Naruto finally managed to look around. He was in a forest, but not one he recognized from the land of fire. The trees were different, broader, with peculiar blue-tinted leaves. The air itself felt heavier, charged with something that wasn't quite chakra. He attempted to stand but fell back as dizziness overwhelmed him. My chakra feels wrong, he muttered. It's adapting, Kurama explained. Or trying to. This world NS on different energy, what I called magic earlier. Our chakra is being altered to survive here. Can you fix it? Stabilize us. I'm trying. But I'm affected too. Rest for now. Let the conversion happen naturally. Naruto leaned back against a tree trunk, trying to regulate his breathing as he'd been taught in sage training. As his initial panic subsided, he extended his senses cautiously, trying to understand his surroundings. The forest teemed with life, birds, insects, small mammals, but all subtly different from what he knew. And the energy. Kurama was right. It wasn't chakra that flowed through this world. It felt wilder, less structured, operating under different rules. He didn't know how long he sat there, half meditating, when a new sensation prickled along his awareness. Something massive was approaching. Something with energy so dense and powerful it made the air vibrate. Hide your presence. Kurama's warning came urgently. Now, Naruto. But it was too late. Whatever was coming had already sensed him. The ground trembled with approaching footsteps, and birds erupted from the treetops in panicked flight. Naruto forced himself upright, ignoring the rottest of his muscles and the disorientation that made the world tilt sideways. The canopy above him shattered as something enormous descended. Branches and leaves exploded outward as a creature Naruto had only seen in storybooks landed before him, shaking the forest floor. A dragon. It towered above the trees, easily 15 meters tall, with midnight black scales marked with pale blue tribal patterns. Massive wings folded against its back, and baleful eyes fixed on Naruto with predatory intelligence. Each breath released wisps of strange energy from its nostrils. What manner of creature are you? The dragon's voice resonated directly in Naruto's mind, bypassing his ears entirely. You reek of another world, yet something in you calls to my blood. Naruto straightened, forcing dense into his stance despite the weakness in his limbs. Never show fear to a predator, that was basic survival. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he replied, unsure if the dragon could hear him normally. I mean no harm to you or this world. The dragon's laughter shook the trees. Harm. To me, acknowledge the Dragon King. It lowered its massive head, bringing one eye level with Naruto. Your very existence is offensive, little one. You carry the stench of divinity that should have been purged centuries ago. Naruto, this creature is dangerous beyond anything we've faced, Kurama warned. Its power rivals the 10 tails. But it's intelligent, focused. We can't fight it in our condition. I don't want to fight, Naruto said aloud, addressing both Kurama and the dragon. I just arrived here by accident. I'm trying to understand what happened. What happened, Acknowledge rumbled, is that you crossed between realms carrying something that should remain forgotten. The dragon inhaled deeply, as though tasting Naruto's scent. Yes, beneath your strange energy, there it lies. The power of the Dragon God. Naruto blinked in confusion. Dragon God, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a shinobi, and I. Silence. Acknowledge's roar flattened the surrounding vegetation with concussive force. Do not speak of what you don't understand, whelp. The mere echo of that power within you is an abomination that cannot be permitted. The dragon reared back, energy gathering in its maw, blue-white power that crackled and distorted the air around it. Move, Kurama bellowed. Naruto leapt aside as Acknowledge's breath attack obliterated the ground where he'd stood. The energy beam carved a trench through the forest, vaporizing everything in its path for hundreds of meters before detonating against a distant mountain with explosive force. Landing in a crouch, Naruto desperately tried to mold chakra for a counterattack. His network responded sluggishly, producing only a fraction of his usual power. He formed a Rasengan in his palm, smaller than normal, unstable, but better than nothing. Acknowledge's tail whipped around with impossible speed, catching Naruto mid-leap. The impact sent him crashing through multiple tree trunks before he slammed into a boulder that shattered with the force of the collision. Pain erupted through his torso, ribs broken, internal damage. Our chakra is still converting. Kurama growled, directing his energy toward Naruto's injuries. I can barely maintain your healing. Naruto staggered to his feet as Acknowledge approached. Each footstep an earth-shaking impact. Any ideas? He gasped. Just one. And you're not going to like it. I'm open to anything right now. Your chakra is being converted to this world's magic, Kurama explained rapidly. But there's something else happening too. Something about you is resonating with this world's dragon power. The beast called you an abomination. It fears what's awakening inside you. How does that help us? Stop fighting the conversion. Let it happen completely. That could kill us both. Probably. But we're dead anyway if you don't. ACN. Olaja gathered energy for another breath attack, the air around its jaws distorting with power. Naruto had no choice. Closing his eyes, he stopped the instinctive resistance he'd been maintaining against the foreign energy invading his system. The effect was immediate and agonizing. Every cell in his body seemed to ignite simultaneously. Kurama's chakra, his own chakra, and something else, something ancient that had lain dormant within him, began to merge and transform. His scream echoed through the forest as golden chakra erupted from his body, then shifted, darkening to a deep crimson tinged with black. Yes, Kurama sounded both pained and triumphant. It's working. The sage's inheritance. It wasn't just chakra he passed to humanity. The old man carried dragon blood too. Naruto could barely process Kurama's words through the pain. His consciousness flickered as the transformation continued, his body becoming a battleground between energies. Through blurred vision, he saw Acknowledge hesitate. The dragon's eyes narrowing with something that might have been uncertainty. Impossible, the Dragon King rumbled. That power was erased from this world. With monumental effort, Naruto straightened. The crimson-black energy swirled around him like living shadow, forming a draconic silhouette that dwarfed his human form. When he spoke, his voice carried a dual resonance. I don't know what's happening to me, he admitted, but I won't let you kill me before I figure it out. Acknowledge's response was another breath attack, more powerful than the first. Naruto raised his hands instinctively, and the crimson-black energy surged forward to meet the incoming blast. The two powers collided with cataclysmic force, creating a shockwave that flattened trees for a kilometer in every direction. To Naruto's astonishment, his energy wasn't overwhelmed. It consumed Acnologia's attack, absorbing rather than deflecting it. The draconic aura around him grew more defined, more substantial, feeding on the dragon's power. Acnologia recoiled, genuine alarm in its ancient eyes. So it is true. The Slayer of Gods returns. The dragon beat its massive wings, creating a winced orm as it rose above the devastated forest. Enjoy your awakening, Godling. When next we meet, you will not find me so unprepared. With that, Acnologia soared upward, quickly becoming a diminishing speck against the sky. Naruto swayed, the crimson-black energy flickering as his consciousness began to fade. The last of his strength exhausted, he collapsed to his knees, then forward onto the scorched earth. The strange power receded, sinking beneath his skin like an ebbing tide. Naruto. Kurama's voice sounded distant, echoing. Stay awake, someone's coming. But darkness was closing in from all sides. Naruto was vaguely aware of approaching footsteps, lighter than the dragon's earth-shaking tread. A figure stood over him, hooded and cloaked, face obscured by a metal mask. The stranger crouched beside him, examining the strange markings that had appeared on Naruto's skin, crimson scales fading to black along his arms. The Dragon God Slayer, the masked figure murmured, voice filled with wonder and concern. After all this time, consciousness slipped away entirely as the stranger lifted him from the ground. Naruto's last thought was of home, of Konoha's gates, of friends left behind. Of a world he might never see again, before oblivion claimed him completely. Dreams and memories swirled in disjointed fragments. Naruto saw Sasuke standing beside him at the Valley of the End. Both of them missing an arm, both exhausted beyond measure. He saw Kakashi's eye-crinkling smile as he handed over the Hokage hat, not to Naruto, but to Kakashi himself, with a promise that Naruto's time would come. He saw Sakura's determined face as she healed wounded shinobi, her strength holding together those who would otherwise fall apart. Then the familiar faces faded, replaced by strange visions. A red-haired woman in armor, wielding swords that appeared from nowhere. A massive black dragon, Acnologia, decimating an island with a single roar. A boy with pink hair, fists wreathed in flames, screaming a battle cry, a guild hall filled with boisterous laughter and camaraderie. And beneath it all, a constant presence, a massive dragon with scales like burnished gold and crimson. Its eyes reflecting cosmic wisdom. Unlike Acnologia's malevolent presence, this dragon emanated warmth and ancient knowledge. It regarded Naruto with eyes that seemed to contain galaxies. Inheritor, the golden dragon spoke, its voice resonating not just in Naruto's mind but through his very soul. The time of awakening approaches. What was scattered will converge. What was forgotten will be remembered. Who are you? Naruto asked in the dreamscape. What's happening to me? I am what remains of Ryoshin, the dragon god, first of all dragons. The great creature's form shimmered, as though not fully present even in this dream realm. And you carry my legacy, the power to consume divine dragon magic itself. I don't understand. I'm a shinobi, not a dragon slayer, whatever that is. The golden dragon's laughter rumbled like distant thunder. The man you called the Sage of Six Paths carried my blood, diluted through generations. When he gifted humanity with chakra, he unknowingly passed on something else, a dormant potential that could only be awakened in the right circumstances. Images flashed through Naruto's mind, ancient battles between dragons and humans, warriors consuming dragon flesh to gain power. Different generations of slayers with different elements and abilities. You stand at the apex of that legacy, Ryoshin continued. Not merely a slayer of fire, iron, poison, or other elements. You are the dragon god slayer, capable of consuming any dragon's power. The progenitor from which all lesser slayer magics descended. Why me? Why now? The cross, in between worlds thinned the barriers that kept my power dormant in your bloodline. And you, specifically, were compatible because of what you already contained, a fragment of every chakra nature, the energy of nine-tailed beasts. The power of six paths. Your body was uniquely prepared to accept this transformation. The dream began to fade, the golden dragon's form becoming transparent. Wait, Naruto called. How do I control this power? How do I get home? Seek the one with scarlet hair, Ryoshin's voice echoed as it faded. She walks a parallel path. As for home, Sometimes, inheritor, destiny offers no return journey. Only a new road forward. The dragon dissolved into particles of golden light, and darkness returned. Consciousness returned gradually, sensation filtering back in disconnected pieces. Soft bedding beneath him, cool cloth on his forehead, the scent of medicinal herbs and forest air, distant birdsong, pain, dull but persistent, throughout his body. Naruto opened his eyes slowly, blinking against even the dim light of the room. He lay in a small wooden cabin, sunlight filtering through curtained windows. His torso was heavily bandaged, and strange markings, like crimson scales, still adorned his arms, though they seemed to have receded somewhat. "You're awake. Good." The voice came from his left. Naruto turned his head to see the hooded figure from the forest sitting nearby. Mask removed to reveal a man with blue hair and an intricate facial tattoo. Something about him felt oddly familiar, as though Naruto should recognize him. "Where am I?" Naruto's voice was raspy from disuse. "Safe, for the moment." The man offered a cup of water, which Naruto accepted gratefully. "We're in a cabin at the edge of the East Forest, outside the city of Magnolia. You've been unconscious for 3 days." Naruto drank deeply before asking, "Who are you?" "Here, I'm known as Mistogen." The man's expression was solemn. "But that's not important right now. What matters is who, and what, you are." He leaned forward, studying Naruto's face. "You're not from Earthland, are you?" The term was unfamiliar. "Earthland? This world?" Mistogen gestured broadly. "You're like me, a visitor from elsewhere. Though I suspect your journey was neither planned nor voluntary." Naruto attempted to sit up, wincing as his ribs protested. "I'm from Konohagakure, the village hidden in the leaves. I was investigating strange energy disturbances when something pulled me through." Mistogen nodded. "Anima, or something similar. Interdimensional portals that can transport matter between worlds. I've studied them extensively." He stood, walking to a nearby table covered with maps and scrolls. "But typical anima don't convert energy the way yours did. Your power was transformed, not just transported. You know what happened to me. I have theories." Mistogen returned with a scroll, which he unrolled to reveal ancient text and illustrations of dragons. "You encountered Aknologia, the black dragon of the apocalypse. Few survive such meetings. He called me an abomination. Said I carried the stench of divinity." Mistogen's expression grew intensely interested. "And then your power changed. I arrived at the end of your confrontation, just in time to see Aknologia retreat. Do you understand the significance of that? Nothing makes Aknologia retreat." Naruto thought of his dream, of Ryoshin and his cryptic explanations. Something about dragon god slayer magic. The scroll dropped from Mistogen's fingers. For several seconds, he stared at Naruto in stunned silence. "That's impossible. That magic is a myth, a legend told to explain the origins of all slayer magic." "Tell that to the golden dragon in my dreams," Naruto muttered. "You dreamed of a golden dragon." Mistogen retrieved the scroll hurriedly, fingers tracing the text until he found a particular passage. "Ryoshin." Naruto's surprise must have shown on his face, because Mistogen immediately continued. "The ancient texts speak of Ryoshin, the dragon god, who existed before element-aligned dragons. He supposedly created dragon-slaying magic as a gift to humans he favored, allowing them to stand against rogue dragons." Mistogen looked up from the scroll. "But the texts also say he disappeared a millennium ago, and his magic with him. He said something about the Sage of Six Paths carrying his blood." Naruto recalled. "About chakra concealing something else that was passed to humans." "Chakra, is that your world's magic?" "Something like that." Naruto attempted to access his chakra, finding it responsive but strange, transformed, as Kurama had warned. "Speaking of which, Kurama, are you there?" "I'm here," came the fox's reply, his mental voice stronger than before. "Recovering. This world's energy is different, but not incompatible with my own. Kurama says we're adapting," Naruto informed Mistogen. "Kurama, a friend, a partner who shares my body." Naruto wasn't sure how to explain the concept of Jinchuriki to someone from another world. Mistogen accepted this with surprising equanimity. "This world has soul-binding magic and talk-over magic that allows sharing consciousness. It's not common, but not unheard of." Naruto attempted to stand, finding his legs unsteady but functional. Mistogen supported him as he took his first tentative steps around the cabin. The markings on your skin, Mistogen observed. Dragon scales. All dragon slayers develop some draconic traits when using their magic, but yours are different, crimson fading to black. Not aligned with any element. Dragon slayers. There are others. A few. Mostly lost magic now. Humans who can use dragon magic taught to them by dragons themselves. Mistogen guided Naruto to a chair near the window. But if you truly possess Dragon God Slayer magic, you're unique. The progenitor of all slayers. Naruto looked out at the unfamiliar forest, reality settling around him with crushing weight. He was in another world. With unfamiliar power, no clear way home, and apparently at the center of some ancient draconic prophecy. What now? He asked quietly. Now, Mistogen replied, you need allies. People who can help you understand this world and your new magic. He produced a sketch of an unusual symbol, something like a bird or fairy. There's a guild in Magnolia called Fairy Tail. They have dragon slayers among their members, and their master is one of the most knowledgeable wizards in Fury. Wizards. Guilds. Think of guilds as organization. Of magic users who take jobs requiring their specific talents. Fairy Tail is the strongest guild in Fury, our kingdom, and known for accepting unusual members. Mistogen's expression softened slightly. They helped me when I first arrived in this world. They can help you too. And they might know how I can get home. Mistogen's hesitation spoke volumes. Perhaps. But interdimensional travel is rare and dangerous. And if Ryoshin chose you as his inheritor, there may be a reason you're needed here. Naruto thought of the dream again. Of Ryoshin's warning that there might be no return journey, only a new road forward. The thought of never seeing Konoha again sent a lance of pain through his chest sharper than any physical injury. We'll find a way back, Kurama assured him. We always do. But first, we need to understand this power and why that black dragon feared it so much. All right, Naruto decided, determination returning to his voice. I'll go to this fairy tale. Learn what I can. Figure out this dragon god slayer magic. He met Mistogen's gaze squarely. And then I'm finding a way home. Mistogen nodded, but his expression remained unconvinced. Rest today. Regain your strength. Tomorrow, I'll guide you to Magnolia. As Mistogen left him to his thoughts, Naruto returned his gaze to the window, watching clouds drift across an alien sky. Somewhere in this strange world were answers. About his new power, about the Golden Dragon's legacy, about the path home. And somewhere, according to Ryoshin, was someone with scarlet hair walking a parallel path to his own. Seek the one with scarlet hair, he murmured, wondering what destiny awaited him in this world called Earthland. Dawn broke with gentle persistence, rousing Naruto from fitful sleep. His dreams had been fragmented, flashes of Konoha interspersed with visions of dragons and battles he'd never witnessed. The cabin was silent, and a quick survey revealed that Mistogen had departed sometime during the night. Leaving only a folded note on the table. Follow the eastern path until you reach Magnolia. Ask for Fairy Tail. Anyone can direct you. Tell Makarov that Mistogen sent you. I have matters to attend to elsewhere. But our paths will cross again. M. P. S. The clothes are enchanted to adjust to their wearer. They should fit. Naruto examined the bundle left beside the note. A high-collared black jacket with orange trim, matching pants, and a white scarf with a scale-like pattern. The materials were unfamiliar but comfortable, and true to Mistogen's note, they adjusted to fit perfectly when he put them on. After a simple breakfast of bread and fruit left by his enigmatic host, Naruto stepped outside the cabin. The morning air was crisp, filled with unfamiliar scents. Birds called in patterns he didn't recognize. Even the sunlight felt different, charged somehow with the same energy he now felt coursing through his veins. The magic here saturates everything, Kurama observed. It's in the air, the water, the soil. Different from natural energy in our world, less balanced, more chaotic. Can we still use Sage Mode? Eventually, perhaps. Our chakra is still adapting. Your body is converting faster than mine. The dragon blood in you is accelerating the process. Naruto flexed his fingers, focusing on the new power within him. It responded eagerly, almost hungrily. crimson-black energy swirling around his hand. Unlike chakra, which flowed in established pathways, this power seemed to permeate his entire being, waiting to be shaped by will alone. It feels alive, he murmured. Like it has its own desire. Be careful with it, Kurama warned. This dragon god slayer magic is predatory by nature. It hungers for dragon energy to consume. Naruto dismissed the power, allowing it to subside. The forest path stretched before him, winding eastward through trees that towered overhead. According to Mistogen's map, Magnolia was half a day's journey on foot, longer if he avoided using his abilities to hasten the trip. He set off at a measured pace, using the time to consider his situation. The initial shock of dimensional displacement had given way to pragmatic assessment, a skill honed through years of unexpected missions and battlefield adaptations. Facts. He was in a world called Earthland. His chakra was converting to this world's magic. He had somehow inherited the power of a mythical dragon god. A dragon called Acknowledges saw him as a threat, and somewhere in a place called Fairy Tale might be answers about how to control his new abilities and possibly return home. One step at a time, he reminded himself, a phrase Kakashi had drilled into him during particularly complex missions. First Magnolia, then Fairy Tale, then answers. The journey through the East Forest was uneventful, though not without interest. Twice Naruto spotted creatures that definitely didn't exist in his world, once a small reptile with rainbow-colored scales that glided between trees on gossamer wings, and later a massive flower that turned to track his movement as he passed, its petals emanating a soft humming sound. By midday, the trees began to thin, and he caught glimpses of a city in the distance, buildings clustered along a lake shore, with mountains rising beyond. Magnolia, presumably. The sight accelerated his pace. As he neared the outskirts, the dirt path gave way to cobblestone streets. People moved about their business, dressed in styles unfamiliar to Naruto but not utterly alien. No one wore shinobi headbands or flak jackets, but otherwise, the scene could almost be a civilian district in one of the larger hidden villages. What was noticeably different was the casual use of magic. A woman hung laundry, with floating clothespins that moved on their own. A street vendor cooked skewers over a flame that changed colors with each new batch. Children played with toys that hovered and spun without visible mechanism. Naruto approached a fruit seller's stall, suddenly aware that he had no local currency. The elderly vendor regarded him curiously. "Excuse me," Naruto began, "could you direct me to Fairy Tale?" The vendor's expression shifted immediately to one of knowing amusement. "Ah, another hopeful looking to join the strongest guild. Or just hoping to catch a glimpse of their famous members. I was told to speak with someone named Makarov," Naruto explained. "The master himself." The vendor seemed impressed. "Well, you can't miss their guild hall, largest building in town with their symbol displayed proudly. Head toward the cathedral and turn right at the canal. You'll see it." Naruto thanked him and turned to leave, but the vendor called after him. "Wait, young man, take this." He offered an apple, its skin a remarkable golden hue. "You have the look of someone who's traveled far. Consider it a welcome to Magnolia." The unexpected kindness reminded Naruto painfully of home. "Thank you," he said sincerely, accepting the gift. As he followed the vendor's directions, Naruto observed the city more carefully. Magnolia was built around a network of canals, with arched bridges connecting different districts. People traveled by foot or boat, and occasionally by what appeared to be magical vehicles. The architecture was distinctive, stone and timber buildings with steep roofs and ornate detailing. Nothing like Konoha's practical structures designed to support rapid shinobi movement. And everywhere, there was magic. Not everyone used it openly, but Naruto's newly enhanced senses could detect the energy signatures of those who carried magic within them, varying in strength and character, but unmistakably similar to what now flowed through his own body. The cathedral came into view, an impressive structure with spires that reached toward the sky. Following the vendor's directions, Naruto turned right at the canal and continued until he saw it, a massive multi-story building with distinctive architecture and a prominent flag bearing the same symbol Mistogen had sketched. Fairy Tale. He approached the entrance, noting the boisterous sounds emanating from within, laughter, shouting, the occasional crash. It reminded him unexpectedly of Ichiraku ramen on a busy night, when off-duty shinobi gathered to unwind. Before he could reach for the door, it burst open, and a half-naked young man with dark hair flew backward through the opening, landing in an undignified heap at Naruto's feet. Despite what appeared to be a forceful ejection, the man seemed more annoyed than injured. "Damn it, Natsu," he shouted, leaping to his feet. "That was a cheap shot." A voice called from inside, "Put some clothes on, Ice Princess." The dark-haired man glanced at Naruto, nodded as though being thrown through doors was perfectly normal, then stalked back inside, apparently oblivious to his state of undress. Naruto stood momentarily stunned, then found himself smiling for tea. He first time since arriving in this world. Perhaps Fairy Tail wasn't so different from home after all. Taking a deep breath, he stepped through the doorway into chaos. Tables and chairs were overturned. Men and women of various ages engaged in what appeared to be a massive brawl, though with more laughter than malice. Magic of different types flashed throughout the hall. Ice, fire, transformation, objects moving on their own. In the center of it all, a pink-haired young man, presumably Natsu, stood atop a table, fists wreathed in flames, challenging all comers with exuberant delight. Naruto had just enough time to recognize him from his dreams before a massive form materialized between the combatants. "Enough!" roared a giant, towering nearly to the ceiling. The fighting stopped instantly. The giant shrunk rapidly, condensing into a tiny, elderly man who stood on the bar counter, arms crossed and expression stern. "How many times must I remind you brats about the repair costs?" The small man demanded, though his severity was belied by the twinkle in his eyes. This, Naruto realized, must be Makarov, the guild master Mistogen had mentioned. As though sensing his presence, Makarov turned, fixing Naruto with a penetrating gaze that seemed to see through flesh and bone to the energy beneath. The old man's eyes widened slightly. Well, he said, voice carrying easily through the suddenly quiet hall. "It seems we have a visitor with a most unusual magic signature." He hopped down from the counter, approaching Naruto with surprising agility for his age. "I don't believe we've met, young man. But there's something about you that feels familiar." The guild members turned their attention to Naruto, curious faces regarding the newcomer. Among them, he spotted a Florida's of crimson, long scarlet hair belonging to a woman in armor who studied him with particular intensity. "Seek the one with scarlet hair." Ryoshin's words echoed in his memory as Naruto met the woman's gaze. Something passed between them, a spark of recognition despite never having met, a sense of connection that transcended the physical. "Mistogen sent me," Naruto said, breaking the moment to address Makarov. "He said you might be able to help me understand what I've become." Makarov's bushy eyebrows rose. "Mistogen, that's unusual in itself." He gestured toward his office. "Come, let's talk privately. Erza," he called to the red-haired woman, "join us, please. And Natsu, you too." The pink-haired man jumped down from the table, his previous battle enthusiasm replaced by curiosity. As he approached, Naruto felt a strange resonance between their magical signatures, similar but different, like dialects of the same language. "He's a dragon slayer," Kurama observed. "Fire element. And there's another nearby, iron, I think." As they moved toward Makarov's office, Naruto caught fragments of whispered conversation behind them. "Did you feel his magic power? Never sensed anything like it. Think he wants to join the guild. Those markings on his arms, almost like Natsu's when he..." The office door closed behind them, shutting out the curious murmurs. Makarov settled behind his desk, while Erza and Natsu remained standing, flanking Naruto without seeming to realize they'd positioned themselves like guards. "Now then," Makarov began, "let's start with introductions. I am Makarov Drayar, master of Fairy Tail. This is Erza Scarlet, S-class wizard and one of our strongest members. And Natsu Dragneel, our fire dragon slayer." "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he replied. "And I'm not from this world." The statement hung in the air for a moment before Makarov nodded. "I suspected as much. Your magic has an unfamiliar quality to it, ancient yet new, like something remembered rather than learned." "Is he like Mistogen?" Erza asked, her voice calm and measured. "From Edelus?" "No." Makarov shook his head. The energy signature is completely different. This is something else entirely. He fixed Naruto with a direct gaze. Tell us your story, young man. Naruto recounted the events that had brought him to Earthland, the anomalies in Konoha, the strange portal. His arrival and encounter with Aknologia, the awakening of his Dragon God Slayer magic, and Mistogen's rescue and guidance. As he spoke, Natsu's expression shifted from skepticism to fascination, especially at the mention of dragons. When Naruto described Ryoshin, the fire dragon slayer couldn't contain himself. You've seen the dragon god? Natsu exclaimed. Igneel mentioned him once, said he was the first dragon. The one who gave dragons their magic. I only saw him in a dream, Naruto clarified. He said I carry his legacy, that the sage of 6 paths from my world had his blood, which was passed down along with chakra. Makarov stroked his mustache thoughtfully. Legends speak of the dragon god as the progenitor of all dragon magic, which would make dragon god slayer magic the origin of all slayer magic. He glanced at Natsu. It would explain the resonance I sense between your magics. There's something else, Naruto added, remembering. Ryoshin told me to seek the one with scarlet hair, who walks a parallel path. All eyes turned to Erza, who appeared startled. Me, I'm not a dragon slayer. No, Makarov agreed, but your Heaven's Wheel armor does have draconic elements in its design. And your magic is uniquely adaptable, much like what Dragon God Slayer magic is rumored to be. Erza studied Naruto with renewed interest. What exactly does Dragon God Slayer magic do? How is it different from Natsu's? I'm still figuring that out, Naruto admitted. But according to Ryoshin, I can consume any dragon's power, not just a specific element. When Aknologia attacked me, my magic absorbed his breath attack rather than being damaged by it. Natsu's eyes widened. You faced Aknologia and lived, and ate his magic. Not by choice, Naruto said dryly. I was barely conscious by the end. Quote, Makarov's expression had grown increasingly serious. If what you're saying is true, and I have no reason to doubt it, given what I sense from you, then your appearance in our world is no accident. Aknologia has long been the greatest threat to Earthland, untouchable by even the strongest wizards. If your magic can counter his, I don't fully control it yet, Naruto cautioned. In my world, I had different abilities, techniques I'd mastered over years. This power is new to me. Then you must learn, Erza said decisively. And Fairy Tail is the best place for that. We have 2 dragon slayers who can help you understand the basics of slayer magic, and Master Makarov's knowledge of ancient magic is unparalleled. Naruto glanced at each of them, Makarov's wise assessment. Natsu's barely contained excitement, Erza's steadfast determination. He thought of Konoha, of the friends and future he'd left behind. But he also thought of Aknologia, of the threat the dragon posed to this world. And of Ryoshin's suggestion that he was here for a purpose. All right, he decided, I'll stay, at least until I understand this power and why I was brought here. After that, he left the sentence unfinished, unwilling to promise anything beyond that point. Makarov nodded, seemingly satisfied. Then welcome to Fairy Tail, Naruto Uzumaki, Dragon God Slayer. We'll help you find your path in this world, whether it leads back to your own or toward a new destiny here. As they exited the office to introduce Naruto to the rest of the guild, he found his gaze drawn once more to Erza Scarlet. She walked beside him, her presence somehow both familiar and enigmatic. Whatever connection Ryoshin had hinted at between them remained to be discovered, but Yuto sensed it would be significant to both their futures. One step at a time, he reminded himself as he faced the curious members of Fairy Tail. First understanding this new power, then finding his place in this world, and hopefully, eventually, a way home. But looking at the welcoming faces around him, especially Erza's measured smile and Natsu's exuberant grin, Naruto couldn't help wondering home, might eventually come to mean something different than he'd always assumed. The thought was both comforting and unsettling as he stepped forward to begin his new journey as the Dragon God Slayer of Fairy Tail. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Scarlet Meetings. Morning light filtered through unfamiliar curtains, casting golden patterns across Naruto's borrowed room at Fairy Hills. Though the En's dormitory remained under construction following some incident involving Natsu's flames, Makarov had arranged temporary accommodations through Fairy Tail's network of allies. The modest chamber fell, T-worlds away from his apartment in Konoha, stone walls instead of plaster, woolen blankets instead of cotton, and a distinct absence of instant ramen cups stacked in corners. 3 days had passed since his introduction to the guild. 3 days of explanations, demonstrations, and gradually acclimating to a world where magic replaced chakra and dragons weren't merely legends. 3 days of fielding endless questions from excited guild members while struggling to answer his own. Naruto traced a finger along the scale-like markings that had appeared during his confrontation with Aknologia. The wide faded slightly but remained visible, crimson near his wrists, darkening to obsidian as they curved up his forearms. Unlike Natsu's dragon scales that appeared only when using magic, these seemed permanent. A visible sign of his altered nature. "They're settling into your body," Kurama observed, his voice stronger each day as they adapted to Earthland's magical energy. "The conversion is nearly complete." "For you too?" Naruto asked, sitting up and stretching muscles that still ached from yesterday's training with Natsu. "My chakra resists the change more stubbornly than yours," the fox admitted. 9 generations of tailed beast energy doesn't transform overnight. But I'm adapting. Naruto moved to the window, gazing across Magnolia's skyline to where the Fairy Tail Guildhall stood proud against the morning sky. Strange to think that barely a week ago, he'd been standing atop the Hokage monument, contemplating his future role as Konoha's leader. Now he contemplated whether he'd ever see those stone faces again. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Naruto." Erza's distinctive voice carried through the door. "Are you awake? Come in," he called, turning from the window. The door opened to reveal Fairy Tail's formidable S-class mage. Unlike her usual armored attire, she wore a simple blue skirt and white blouse, her scarlet hair cascading freely down her back. Only the sword at her hip betrayed her warrior identity. "You're not dressed," she observed matter-of-factly, eyes briefly noting his bare chest before settling on his face with practiced discipline. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. "Sorry, just woke up. Give me a minute." Erza nodded and stepped outside while Naruto pulled on the clothes Fairy Tail had provided, black pants, orange-trimmed jacket, and the white scale-patterned scarf that Natsu insisted was proper Dragon Slayer attire. The familiarity of orange in his wardrobe offered small comfort in this unfamiliar world. When he emerged, Erza stood examining a landscape painting in the hallway, her posture perfectly straight. She turned at his approach, brown eyes assessing him with that direct gaze that reminded him somehow of Tsunade, piercing but not unkind. "Master Makarov suggested I take you on a mission today," she explained as they walked toward the building's exit. "Something relatively straightforward to help you understand how guild assignments work." "I appreciate that," Naruto replied. "I'm still trying to wrap my head around the whole magical jobs for hire concept." Magnolia bustled with morning activity as they made their way toward the guild, merchants arranging wares, children rushing to school, canal boats delivering goods. The normalcy of daily life continued regardless of inter-dimensional travelers or draconic prophecies. "Yesterday's training with Natsu seemed productive," Erza commented. "Though expensive in terms of property damage." Naruto winced at the memory. Their sparring session had resulted in 3 broken trees, a crater in Fairy Tail's back courtyard, and singed eyebrows for the unfortunate gray who'd wandered too close. "Slayer magic is more explosive than I'm used to. In my world, chakra techniques could be just as destructive, but the control mechanisms are different." "Your shadow clones were impressive," Erza offered. Even Biska couldn't tell which was the original. "One technique that transferred intact," Naruto acknowledged. "Though they drain more energy here than they did in my world." They walked in comfortable silence for several blocks. Despite knowing her barely 3 days, Naruto found himself at ease in Erza's company. Perhaps it was Ryoshin's prophecy creating some unconscious connection, or perhaps it was simply her straightforward nature, so refreshingly free of the pitying glances others gave the displaced traveler. "You're homesick," Erza observed suddenly, startling him with her perception. Naruto considered deflecting with humor as he often did, but something in her expression invited honesty. "Yeah, I keep catching myself thinking about what everyone's doing back in Konoha. Whether they're looking for Me, or if time even passes the same between dimensions. Erza nodded, her eyes distant. I understand displacement, not between worlds, but I wasn't always at Fairy Tale. She didn't elaborate, but her hand unconsciously touched her upper arm, where Naruto had glimpsed a marking when she changed armors during yesterday's demonstration. They reached the Guildhall, already lively despite the early hour. Miragen greeted them with her signature smile from behind the bar, while Natsu and Gray argued loudly near the request board, seemingly moments away from their typical brawl. Naruto. Natsu abandoned his argument mid-sentence, bounding over with characteristic enthusiasm. Fight me again today. I've been working on a new technique that'll definitely work against your weird shadow magic. Gray rolled his eyes, somehow having lost his shirt in the 30 seconds since they'd entered. Give it a rest, Flame Brain. He kicked your ass yesterday. He did not. It was a strategic withdrawal. Is that what you call running away with your pants on fire? Natsu butted heads with Gray, sparks literally flying between them. You wanna go, Ice Princess? Gentlemen. Erza's single D carried enough authority to freeze both wizards instantly. Naruto will be accompanying me on a mission today. Your rematch will have to wait. Natsu's disappointment lasted approximately 3 seconds before transforming into new excitement. A mission? What kind? Fighting monsters. Dark guilds. Can I come? Request board. Natsu, Erza directed firmly. Find your own mission. She led Naruto to Makarov, who sat cross-legged atop the bar counter, nursing a mug of something fragrant and almost certainly alcoholic despite the early hour. Ah, Naruto, Erza. The guild master's eyes twinkled with knowing amusement. Ready for your first official fairy tale mission? As ready as I'll be, Naruto replied. Though I'm still not clear on the details. Makarov produced a folded paper from his coat. Nothing too complicated for your first outing. We've received reports of unusual magical activity in the forests north of Shiratsum town. Normally I'd classify this as routine reconnaissance, but given recent events. His eyes flickered meaningfully to the scale markings on Naruto's arms. I thought it prudent to investigate whether it might be connected to dragon activity. Naruto accepted the mission paper, scanning its contents. Magical disturbances, withered vegetation, unusual weather patterns, sounds similar to the anomalies I was investigating before coming here. Precisely why I thought you might provide valuable insight, Makarov nodded. And Erza's combat expertise ensures you'll be prepared for whatever you encounter. We'll depart immediately, Erza decided, already mentally cataloging which armors to bring. Makarov's expression grew more serious. One more thing. We've also received word that a dark guild has been operating in that region, Crimson Fang. They're relatively small but dangerous, specializing in blood magic and artifact theft. Exercise appropriate caution. Erza's eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication that she recognized the name. Understood, Master. As they prepared to leave, Miragen approached with a small pack. Some supplies for your journey, she explained, handing it to Naruto with a smile that didn't quite mask her concern. Food, basic medical items, and a communication lacrima tuned to our guild frequency. Just channel a small amount of magic into it if you need to contact us. Thanks, Miragen, Naruto said, genuinely touched by her thoughtfulness. Mira is fine, she corrected gently. And do be careful, dark guilds aren't like our friendly guild brawls. They fight to kill, her warning reminded Naruto that despite Fairy Tale's boisterous atmosphere, these wizards were no strangers to serious combat. The casual way Makarov mentioned dark guilds suggested a world where magical conflict was normalized, not unlike the shinobi system he'd grown up in. We should reach Shiratsum by midday if we catch the next train, Erza announced, returning with an impossibly large cart of luggage. Naruto stared at the mountain of suitcases. That's a lot of equipment for a reconnaissance mission. One must be prepared for any situation, she replied with absolute seriousness. I've packed only 17 essential armors and the bare minimum of supplies. Behind Naruto, Miragen suppressed a giggle. You'll get used to it, she whispered. Just be grateful you're not dragon sick like Natsu. Train rides with him are challenging. The train to Shiratsum chugged steadily through verdant countryside, passing forests, farms, and the occasional small village. Naruto sat across from Erza in their private compartment, watching the unfamiliar landscape roll by while contemplating how different magical transportation was from shinobi travel methods. "You're adapting well," Erza observed, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "To fairy tale, to Earthland. Many would be overwhelmed." Naruto shrugged, offering a small smile. "I've had practice adapting to unexpected situations. Comes with the shinobi territory. Though I will say, your guild takes chaotic to new levels." "Fairy tale can be intense," Erza acknowledged, a rare hint of humor softening her expression. "But there's no place I'd rather be. They're family in every way that matters." "I can see why. Reminds me of Konoha in that way, people bound by something stronger than blood or obligation." Erza studied him with renewed interest. "You were important there, weren't you? In your world." The question caught Naruto off guard, though he shouldn't have been surprised by her perception. "What makes you say that?" "The way you carry yourself. The way you assess situations and people, always considering implications beyond the immediate moment. These aren't traits of an ordinary soldier." Her eyes met his directly. "And there's a certain weight to your presence that speaks of responsibility." For a moment, Naruto considered downplaying his role. But there was something in Erza's straightforward assessment that deserved equal honesty. "I was being groomed to become Hokage, leader of my village," he admitted. "After the war, it was pretty much decided, just a matter of timing. Kakashi Sensei, the current Hokage, said he was keeping the hat warm for me." Understanding dawned in Erza's eyes. "That explains much about your approach to guild dynamics. You watch everyone, noting strengths, weaknesses, relationships. As a leader would." "Old habits," Naruto acknowledged. "In your guild terms, I guess I was equivalent to an S-class ninja on track to become guild master." The train whistle sounded as they approached a station, momentarily pausing the conversation. When the journey resumed, Erza shifted topics. "Tell me about your magic, or chakra, as you call it. How does it differ from what you're developing now?" Naruto considered how to explain concepts that had no direct equivalent in this world. Chakra is a combination of physical and spiritual energy that flows through established pathways in the body. We manipulate it through hand signs and mental focus to create different effects, elemental techniques, illusions, physical enhancements. He demonstrated by creating a small Rasengan in his palm, the swirling blue energy now tinged with crimson at its edges. "This was one of my signature techniques. Pure chakra shaped and compressed into a sphere. But now it has something extra." Erza leaned forward, studying the spiraling orb with fascination. "The crimson energy, that's your dragon god slayer magic integrating with your original power." "Exactly. And it changes how the technique functions." He allowed the Rasengan to dissipate. "Before, it was purely concussive force. Now it has a hungering quality. Like it wants to consume whatever it touches." "That's consistent with Dragon Slayer magic," Erza confirmed. "Natsu's flames don't just burn, they consume fire magic directed against him. Gajil's iron techniques can devour metal. Your magic lick, Ely functions similarly but without elemental limitation." Naruto nodded thoughtfully. "Ryoshin said I could consume any dragon's power. I guess that explains why Acknowledger retreated after attacking me." "Few things frighten Acknowledger," Erza said grimly. "The fact that your magic caused him to withdraw speaks volumes about its potential." The conversation paused as a train attendant delivered tea and light refreshments. Naruto watched with amusement as Erza immediately selected a strawberry cake from the offerings, her usual stern demeanor softening noticeably at the first bite. "You really love cake, huh?" he observed, fighting a smile. Erza's expression became deadly serious. "Strawberry cake is one of life's perfect creations and should be accorded appropriate respect." The absolute conviction in her voice made Naruto laugh, a genuine, unguarded sound that seemed to surprise Erza before her own lips curved upward. "What?" she challenged, though without real heat. "Nothing," Naruto assured her, still smiling. "Just, in my world, I had a similar relationship with ramen. Some things transcend dimensions, I guess." As the train continued its journey, their conversation drifted between topics. Naruto sharing stories of Team 7's missions, Erza recounting particularly chaotic fairy tale adventures. With each exchange, the initial formality between them softened, revealing unexpected commonalities beneath their different backgrounds. By the time they reached Shiratsum Station, Naruto realized he'd talked more freely with Erza in those few hours than he had with anyone since arriving in Earthland. Something about her direct nature invited reciprocal honesty, creating a foundation of trust that usually required far longer to establish. Perhaps this is part of what Ryoshin meant by parallel paths, he thought as they disembarked. Two people shaped by different worlds yet understanding each other through shared experiences of burden, loss, and unwavering dedication to protecting their precious people. Shiratsum town spread before them like an illustration from a storybook, quaint buildings with steep pitched roofs, cobblestone streets, and a central square where local merchants hawked their wares. Though similar in size to Magnolia, it lacked the larger city's magical focus, its citizens primarily engaged in mundane trades and agriculture. We should speak with the town's mayor first, Erza decided, somehow managing her mountain of luggage without apparent effort. The request originated from his office. Naruto nodded, still adjusting to the concept of mission protocols in this world. In Konoha, they would have reported to the local daimyo's representative or established a base of operations before contacting the client. Here, the direct approach seemed standard. Mayor Baskerville received them in his modest office, a nervous-looking man whose constant handkerchief twisting betrayed significant anxiety. Relief flooded his features, upon learning they were fairy tale wizards. "Thank heavens you've come," he exclaimed, dabbing his forehead. "The situation has only worsened since I sent the request. 3 more acres of forest withered overnight, and the local farmers report their animals refusing to approach the northern ridgeline." "When did these phenomena begin?" Erza inquired, her posture professional and attentive. "Approximately 2 weeks ago," the mayor replied. "First, unusual lights in the sky above the northern forest. Then strange weather patterns, localized rain that moved against the wind, mist that glowed blue at night. Finally, the withering began, plants dying despite no drought or disease, turning to ash at the slightest touch." Naruto exchanged meaningful glances with Erza. The timeline coincided with his arrival in Earthland. "Has anyone gone missing during this period?" Naruto asked. "Or perhaps, appeared suddenly without explanation." The mayor hesitated. "Well, yes, actually. The situation has attracted several unusual visitors, scholars claiming to study rare magical phenomena. A group of hooded individuals who purchased supplies but spoke to no one. And most recently, armed men and women bearing unusual markings, here. On their shoulders." He traced a fang-like symbol on his own arm. "Crimson Fang," Erza confirmed grimly. "They've established a presence here already. We've kept our distance," Baskerville assured them. "They've made no direct threats, but their reputation precedes them." "Wise decision," Erza nodded. "We'll need to see the affected areas ourselves. Can you provide a guide familiar with the northern forest?" The mayor shook his head. "No one will go near it anymore. Not since woodcutter Henrik returned babbling about trees that bled and shadows that moved independently of objects." His handkerchief resumed its nervous dance between his fingers. "But I can provide maps and the location of Henrik's cabin. He might share more details directly." As they prepared to leave with the promised materials, Naruto paused, noticing the mayor's obvious distress. "We'll handle this," he assured the man, his tone confident without bravado. Fairy Tale specializes in exactly these kinds of situations. Something in Naruto's steady gaze and absolute certainty seemed to finally ease the mayor's anxiety. He straightened slightly, handkerchief dropping forgotten to his desk. "Yes, of course. Fairy Tale's reputation is well deserved. Thank you, young man." Outside, Erza gave Naruto an approving nod. "Well handled." Sometimes reassurance is as important as action in these situations. "People need to know someone competent is addressing their problems," Naruto replied with a shrug. "Fear feeds on uncertainty." They located Henrik's cabin on the outskirts of town, a small, well-maintained structure with elaborate protective charms hanging from every eave and windowsill. The woodcutter himself proved to be a burly man with a magnificent beard and haunted eyes that had seen things his mind struggled to process. "You're going up there?" he asked incredulously after they explained their purpose. "Then you're either braver than most or foolish beyond measure. We're fairy tale wizards," Erza stated, as though this explained everything. Perhaps in Earthland, it did. Henrik studied them skeptically before sighing heavily. At least let me tell you what to watch for. The disturbances follow patterns. They're strongest at dusk and dawn, concentrated around a clearing with stone formations about 3 miles north. The trees there, he shuddered visibly. They ain't right. They move when they shouldn't, and the shadows they cast don't match their shapes. Dimensional instability, Naruto murmured, recognizing the description from reports in Konoha before his displacement. The barrier between worlds is thin there. Whatever you call it, it ain't natural, Henrik insisted. And those Crimson Fang folk are camped nearby, digging and chanting at all hours. Looking for something, they are. Erza's expression darkened. Did you observe what they're searching for? Some kind of artifact, from what I overheard. Something abo, oot, the dragon's tear, and passage between realms. Mystical nonsense, I thought, until I saw a patch of air split open like a curtain, showing a glimpse of somewhere else. Henrik's hands trembled, as he poured himself a generous measure of amber liquid. That's when I packed up and ran. After gathering as many details as Henrik could provide, they departed toward the northern forest. Erza had re-equipped to her standard Heart Cruise armor, practical for travel while maintaining combat readiness. Your thoughts? She asked as they followed the narrow trail into increasingly dense woodland. The descriptions match the anomalies I was investigating before coming here, Naruto confirmed. In my world, they appeared in locations with historical significance, places where major chakra events had occurred in the past. If the pattern holds true, that clearing probably has magical importance. And Crimson Fang's interest in dimensional artifacts is concerning, Erza added. Especially given your arrival. The forest grew denser as they progressed, sunlight filtering through the canopy in dappled patterns. Under normal circumstances, it would have been quite beautiful. But Naruto's enhanced senses detected the wrongness Henrik had described, subtle at first, then increasingly obvious as they approached their destination. Trees that should have swayed together in the breeze moved asynchronously. Birdsong echoed with peculiar harmonics, as though bouncing off barriers that weren't visibly present. The air itself felt thinner in some patches, heavier in others, creating an irregular resistance as they walked. The ambient magic is distorted, Erza observed, her hand resting cautiously on her sword hilt. Similar to what happens during certain teleportation spells, but unfocused, unstable. It's getting worse, Naruto noted as the light around them pulsed subtly, colors shifting toward blue-violet spectrums. We must be getting close to the source. They emerged into the clearing Henrik had described, and both stopped abruptly at the sight before them. Ancient stone monoliths formed a rough circle around a central depression in the earth. The grass within the circle had withered to ash gray, while the stones themselves glowed with faint runes similar to those Naruto had observed before his displacement. But most striking was the air above the circle's center, rippling like water's surface, occasionally parting to reveal fleeting glimpses of somewhere decidedly not Earthland. Mountains Naruto didn't recognize, strange crystalline structures. Once, briefly, had looked disturbingly like an enormous eye. A dimensional tear, he whispered. Just like the one that brought me here. Recently widened, Erza noted, pointing to fresh tool marks on the nearest monolith. Someone has been activating these runes deliberately. Naruto approached cautiously, the dragon god slayer magic within him responding to the tear's proximity. Crimson black energy flickered across his skin, drawn toward the distortion as though recognizing something kindred. Be careful, Kurama cautioned. This tear isn't stable like the one that brought us here. It's shifting between multiple dimensional planes. Not just two. We need to. Naruto began, but froze as new sensations assaulted his awareness. Someone's coming. Multiple someones, approaching from the northeast. Erza nodded, having sensed the same. 7 distinct magical signatures, moving with purpose, not hiding their approach. They positioned themselves strategically, Erza beside a monolith that offered both cover and visibility. Naruto creating 3 shadow clones to establish a perimeter around the clearing. If these were Crimson Fang members, direct confrontation seemed inevitable. The approaching group emerged from the tree line with confident strides, 5 men and 2 women, each bearing the Fang insignia on exposed shoulders or necks. Their leader, a tall woman with ash blonde hair and calculating eyes. surveyed the clearing before focusing on Erza and Naruto. Fairy Tail, she observed, noting their guild marks with obvious distaste. Always interfering where you're not wanted. This area has been experiencing dangerous magical disturbances, Erza replied evenly. The town's mayor requested our assistance. The woman smiled without warmth. How convenient. We've been conducting important research here for weeks, and suddenly Fairy Tail appears the moment we make progress. Her gaze shifted to Naruto, narrowing as she noted his scale markings. And you've brought something interesting with you. A new type of slayer, perhaps. Naruto maintained a neutral expression, though internally he tensed at her specific interest. We're here about the dimensional tier. It's causing environmental damage and poses a threat to nearby settlements. The tear is precisely what we're studying, the woman countered. I'm Vasilia, senior researcher for Crimson Fang. We specialize in boundary magic and artifact retrieval. Dark guilds don't study or research, Erza stated flatly. They exploit and destroy. Whatever you're doing here violates multiple council regulations regarding dimensional manipulation. Quote, Vasilia's false pleasantry evaporated. The Magic Council's short-sightedness doesn't concern us. We've tracked dimensional fluctuations across Fury for months, identifying a pattern that culminated here. Something crossed over, something with immense magical significance. Her gaze returned to Naruto with new intensity. Or perhaps I should say someone. The standoff tensed as Vasilia's companions spread out, magic circles appearing around their hands in preparation for combat. Last chance to depart peacefully, Erza warned, her own magic flaring as she prepared to requip. Counterproposal, Vasilia replied smoothly. You surrender the Dragon Slayer to us for examination, and the rest of Fairy Tail needn't mourn your loss. Erza's response was immediate and definitive. Golden light engulfed her as she requipped into Heaven's Wheel armor, a dozen swords materializing in the air around her. Naruto is a member of Fairy Tail, under our protection and part of our family. Your threats mean nothing. Something shifted in Naruto at her words, a warmth that momentarily overshadowed the tension of imminent battle. In just days, these people had claimed him as their own, extending the same absolute loyalty they showed each other to someone who had quite literally fallen into their world. No time to dwell on the sentiment, however, as Vasilia's patience expired. Take them, she commanded. The Slayer alive. The woman is expendable. The clearing erupted into chaos as Crimson Fang mages launched simultaneous attacks. Blood-red magic RCLES appeared beneath two mages' feet as they slashed their own palms, transforming the spilled blood into crimson whips that lashed toward Erza. Another conjured swirling shadows that lunged for Naruto while the remaining three began a joint casting, their combined magic pulsing ominously. Erza moved with breathtaking efficiency, her swords intercepting the blood whips while she launched forward to engage their casters directly. Steel clashed against hastily raised blood shields as she pressed her advantage, never allowing them to re-establish distance. Naruto faced the Shadow Mage, his bod. Y responding with shinobi reflexes enhanced by his new draconic senses. The shadows pursued him with unnatural persistence, twisting to anticipate his movements rather than following them. They're not ordinary shadows, Kurama observed. They're partially phased into another dimension. Physical attacks might not affect them fully. Testing this theory, Naruto launched a kunai through a tendril of shadow, watching as it passed through with minimal resistance. The shadow itself shuddered but reformed immediately. Magic against magic then, he decided, drawing on the Dragon God Slayer power that hummed beneath his skin. Crimson-black energy engulfed his hands as he faced the next shadow attack directly. Instead of dodging, he grasped the writhing darkness, his draconic magic responding instinctively. The shadow resisted momentarily, then began to dissipate as Naruto's power consumed it, drawing the magical energy into himself. He's absorbing Chiron's shadows. One of the blood mages shouted in alarm, momentarily distracted from his battle with Erza. That moment of inattention cost him as Erza's blade found the gap in his defense, sending him crashing unconscious to the forest floor. His companion redoubled her efforts, blood magic forming increasingly complex patterns to counter Erza's relentless assault. The Shadow Mage, presumably Chiron, snarled in frustration as Naruto continued consuming his attacks. Abandoning his specialty, He drew a curved dagger and lunged physically instead, only to encounter one of Naruto's shadow clones while the original flanked him. Rasengan. Naruto drove the swirling orb, now infused with crimson-black energy, into the ground beside Chiron, deliberately missing the mage himself but creating a concussive shockwave that launched his opponent skyward. The three mages who had been casting jointly completed their spell with triumphant cries. The earth beneath the clearing trembled as the dimensional tear above widened dramatically, edges stabilizing into a defined portal. Through it, a landscape of jagged crystal formations and violet skies became clearly visible. The Exolite Dimension, Vasilia exclaimed, eyes gleaming with zealous intensity. We've found it at last. Erza disengaged from her opponent, reequipping instantly into flight armor to close the distance to the portal. They're trying to access another realm entirely. The dimensional doorway pulsed, emitting waves of disruptive magic that staggered everyone in the clearing. Trees at the perimeter began to warp, twisting into unnatural shapes as real. ITY itself buckled under the strain of maintaining the portal. We need to close it, Naruto called, instinctively understanding the danger. That dimension is hostile to this one. Vasilia laughed, a sound edged with fanaticism. Close it. We've spent years searching for this specific dimensional alignment. The artifacts within can reshape magical understanding itself. As if responding to her words, something shifted in the portal's depths. A crystalline object drifted toward the opening, tear-shaped, approximately the size of a fist, glowing with internal blue-violet light. The dragon's tear they'd mentioned to Henrik. Presumably, protect the portal, Vasilia commanded her remaining followers. The tear approaches. The joint casters renewed their efforts, channeling more power into stabilizing the dimensional doorway. Meanwhile, the blood mage facing Erza disengaged to intercept Naruto, who was moving toward the portal with obvious intent to disrupt it. Naruto, Erza called, sending a barrage of swords to clear his path. The tear in the center, it's drawing power from the monoliths. Disrupt the stone circle. Understanding her strategy, Naruto created additional shadow clones, each targeting a different monolith. The ancient stones proved resistant to normal attacks, absorbing physical impacts without visible damage. Use the Dragon God Slayer magic, Kurama advised. These stones are infused with draconic energy, ancient, but still recognizable. Trusting the fox's assessment, Naruto channeled crimson-black energy through his hands, pressing them against the nearest monolith. The effect was immediate. The stone's runes flared brilliantly before beginning to dim, their power flowing into Naruto as his magic consumed their draconic essence. Stop him, Vasilia shrieked, abandoning the portal to attack Naruto directly. Her magic manifested as swirling vortices of force that distorted space itself around her hands. He's absorbing the anchor points. Erza intercepted her with flawless timing, reequipping mid-movement into purgatory armor. The massive dark blade crashed against Vasilia's spatial distortions, creating a localized shockwave that splintered nearby trees. Your portal ends here, Erza stated with deadly calm, pressing her advantage. Throughout the clearing, Naruto's clones continued the process of draining the monoliths, each stone darkening as its ancient power transferred to the Dragon God Slayer. With each absorption, Naruto felt his own magic expanding, adapting, integrating the dimensional knowledge embedded in the runes. The portal began to fluctuate wildly as its anchor points weakened. The crystalline tear that had nearly reached their dimension retreated suddenly, pulled back by unknown forces as the doorway began to collapse. No, Vasilia screamed, desperation replacing calculation in her eyes. With unexpected ferocity, she broke from her battle with Erza, launching herself toward Naruto with hands WRE. Aft in spatial magic capable of shredding matter at the molecular level. I won't let you ruin years of research. Erza moved with incredible speed, but distance and momentum favored Vasilia. Naruto turned from the monolith to face the attack, raising crimson-black energy as a shield, uncertain if his magic could counter her spatial distortions. He never had to find out. A brilliant flash of Teal intercepted Vasilia mid-lunge. Erza's sword, thrown with perfect accuracy to pin the dark mage's sleeve to a nearby tree trunk, halting her attack mere inches from Naruto's face. Before Vasilia could free herself, Erza had reequipped again, appearing beside her with dual swords crossed at her throat. It's over, Erza declared, her tone allowing no argument. The remaining Crimson Fang members, seeing their leader captured and the portal collapsing, abandoned their positions and fled into the forest. Naruto let them go. Pursuing them would mean leaving the dimensional tear unsecured. With the last monolith drained, the portal contracted rapidly, dimensional energies recoiling like a severed elastic band. The tear sealed with a thunderous implosion that reversed the environmental distortions, withered grass rejuvenating, warped trees straightening, the very air seeming to sigh with relief as natural order reasserted itself. Silence fell over the clearing, broken only by Vasilia's frustrated breathing as Erza secured her with magic inhibiting restraints. "You've no idea what you've done," the dark mage spat. "That artifact could have revolutionized dimensional travel, opened ways to realms of untapped magical power, and destabilized the entire region in the process," Naruto countered, examining the now dormant monoliths. "These stones were never meant to maintain a permanent doorway between dimensions. They're markers, not gateways." Vasilia's eyes narrowed. "You know more than you should, Slayer." "What exactly are you?" "He's Fairy Tail," Erza answered before Naruto could respond. "That's all you need to know." As Erza secured their prisoner for transport back to Shiratsum, Naruto examined the clearing more thoroughly. The dimensional energy had dissipated, but echoes remained, faint impressions in the magical atmosphere that resonated with his own displaced nature. "You absorbed significant power from those monoliths," Kurama noted. "Ancient conic magic specifically related to dimensional boundaries. Could it help us get home?" Naruto asked quietly, ensuring Erza couldn't overhear. "Perhaps, eventually, but it needs time to integrate with your existing magic. And," the fox hesitated uncharacteristically, and I'm not certain our original dimension is accessible from this one through conventional means. The path that brought us here was unusual, a specific resonance between your chakra and this world's draconic energy. The implication hung silently between them. Without that precise combination of factors, returning might be impossible regardless of how much dimensional knowledge Naruto acquired. "Ready," Erza called, interrupting his thoughts. She had re-equipped back to her standard armor, Vasilia erred and unconscious over one shoulder while she effortlessly managed her luggage cart with her free hand. Naruto nodded, pushing aside the weight of dimensional theory to focus on the present. "What will happen to her?" "The Rune Knights will take custody once we return to town," Erza explained as they began the journey back. "Unauthorized dimensional manipulation carries severe penalties under council law." They walked in companionable silence for several minutes before Erza spoke again, her tone more personal than it had been during the mission. "Your magic, it's evolving rapidly. The why you absorbed the monoliths' energy was impressive. It feels more natural now," Naruto acknowledged. "Like my body is remembering something it always knew rather than learning something new." Erza nodded thoughtfully. "Dragon Slayer magic often works that way, according to Natsu. He describes it as awakening a dragon's instincts within human form. It's still strange, thinking of myself as part dragon," Naruto admitted. "In my world, I already contained another entity. Adding draconic elements to that mix is complicated." "You handle it well," Erza observed. "With remarkable adaptation and control for someone so recently introduced to Slayer magic." The compliment, delivered with Erza's characteristic straightforwardness, carried genuine weight. She wasn't one for empty praise or exaggeration. "Thanks," Naruto replied, finding himself unexpectedly pleased by her acknowledgement. "Though I still have a lot to learn about how magic works in this world." "Fairy Tail is the perfect place for that," Erza said with rare warmth. "We specialize in the unusual and unprecedented. And speaking as someone who once had to find her place there." Her eyes met his with understanding that went beyond words. "Sometimes where you land becomes more home than where you began." The statement lingered between them as they continued toward Shiratsum, not a dismissal of Naruto's desire to return to Konoha, but a gentle suggestion that until such return became possible, Fairy Tail offered something genuine and valuable. By the time they reached the town's outskirts, twilight had fallen, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet. Mayor Baskerville received their report with effusive gratitude, especially when informed that the magical disturbances should now dissipate completely. "Fairy Tail's reputation is well deserved," he declared, authorizing immediate payment of the reward. "Please extend my personal thanks to Master Makarov." With Vasilia remanded to local authorities awaiting Rune Knight transport, Naruto and Erza found themselves with unexpected free time before the morning train back to Magnolia. We should celebrate a successful first mission, Erza decided, leading Naruto toward a local inn known for its excellent kitchen. It's tradition in fairy tale to mark such occasions. The inn's dining room was cozy and warmly lit, with wooden beams over EAD and a crackling fireplace in the corner. They settled at a quiet table, ordering a substantial meal that reflected both their magical exertion and healthy appetites. So, Erza began after their food arrived. What did you think of your first official guild mission? Naruto considered the question while sampling a dish of roasted meat and vegetables unlike anything from Konoha's cuisine. FF errant from shinobi assignments in some ways, similar in others. We handle jobs for civilians too, but there's more structure, more oversight from the village. The council attempts oversight, Erza noted with a hint of amusement. But Fairy Tail has a complex relationship with authority. I noticed, Naruto chuckled. Makarov reminds me of our third Hokage, wise and powerful, but with a rebellious streak when it comes to protecting his people. A apt comparison. Erza's expression softened slightly. The master sees the best in everyone, even those society has rejected. It's why Fairy Tail attracts such diverse members. The conversation drifted to lighter topics as they enjoyed their meal. Naruto described Konoha's landmarks and traditions, Erza recounted particularly memorable fairy tale celebrations and disasters, often the same events. The initial formality that had characterized their early interactions had transformed into genuine camaraderie. As they finished dessert, strawberry cake for Erza, naturally, Naruto found himself studying her with new appreciation. Beyond her formidable combat abilities and leadership qualities, there was a depth to Erza Scarlet that reminded him of the strongest people he'd known in Konoha, those who had endured profound hardship yet emerged with their capacity for compassion intact. You're staring, she observed, direct as always. Sorry, Naruto replied, not actually looking away, just thinking that Ryoshin was right about you walking a parallel path. There's something familiar about your spirit, like we've fought similar battles in different worlds. Instead of dismissing the observation as fanciful, Erza considered it seriously. Perhaps that's what the dragon god sensed, not identical experiences, but resonant ones. Paths that echo each other across dimensions. Making it easier for me to understand this world through you, and maybe for you to understand mine through me, Naruto suggested. An interesting theory. Erza set down her fork, having finished her cake with characteristic thoroughness. And one that might explain why I've found it unusually easy to talk with you, despite your recent arrival. The admission surprised Naruto slightly, not because he hadn't felt the same ease, but because Erza rarely acknowledged such personal observations aloud. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted near the inn's entrance. A breathless messenger burst through the door, eyes scanning the room until they landed on Erza's distinctive scarlet hair. Fairy Tail wizards, the young man gasped, rushing to their table. Thank goodness. The prisoner, the Dark Guild woman, she's escaped. Her companions ambushed the holding cells. Erza was on her feet instantly, re-equipping into flight armor for speed. Which direction did they flee? Not 10 minutes passed. Northward, toward the forest again. Naruto stood as well, Dragon God Slayer magic already swirling beneath his skin in anticipation. Back to the monoliths, he predicted. Even drained, they're still focal points for dimensional energy. We can't let them re-establish that portal, Erza stated, leaving payment for their meal as they rushed toward the door. Agreed, Naruto replied, matching her urgent pace. But this time, let's make sure they don't come back for a third attempt. They raced through Shiratsune's darkening streets, Erza's flight armor and Naruto's enhanced physical abilities allowing them to move at speeds that reduced buildings to blurs. The bond forged through shared combat and conversation just hours earlier now translated into wordless coordination as they approached the forest's edge. Whatever Crimson Fang planned, they would face not just a Fairy Tail S-class wizard and a former shinobi with strange new powers, but a partnership beginning to realize the potential Ryoshin had foreseen when he directed Naruto to seek the one with scarlet hair. As they entered the forest, magic and dragon God Slayer energy illuminating their path through the darkness, Both sensed that this mission had become something more significant than a simple reconnaissance, the first chapter in a longer story co-necting their parallel paths into a shared journey. The monoliths awaited in the moonlight, ancient sentinels to whatever confrontation would unfold in the clearing where worlds had briefly touched. And beyond that clearing, beyond this mission, awaited answers about Naruto's purpose in Earthland and the connection between a displaced shinobi and a scarlet-haired wizard that transcended the boundaries of their respective worlds. Night had fully claimed the forest by the time they reached the outskirts of the clearing. Moonlight filtered through branches, casting dappled silver patterns across the underbrush. Naruto signaled for a halt, extending his senses toward the monolith circle. 7 magical signatures, he whispered. The same group from earlier. They've positioned vase around the perimeter, one at each monolith. Erza nodded, her flight armor allowing her to balance effortlessly on a narrow branch beside him. Vasilia likely believes she can reactivate the stones despite your draining them. She's partially right, Naruto admitted. I absorbed their active energy, but the monoliths themselves are ancient conduits. Given enough time and the right approach, they could be recharged. Through the trees, they could see faint crimson light emanating from the clearing, blood magic at work, attempting to infuse the stones with new power. We need to separate them from the monoliths, Erza reasoned. Disrupt the ritual before it progresses too far. Naruto considered their options, drawing on both shinobi tactics and his growing understanding of magical dynamics. I'll create shadow clones to approach from multiple angles. When they engage, the blood mages will need to defend themselves, breaking their concentration on the ritual. While they're distracted, I'll target Vasilia directly. Erza continued, intuitively building on his strategy. Without her, the others lack the knowledge to complete the dimensional working. The seamless tactical integration felt natural, as though they'd planned missions together for years rather than days. With a nod of agreement, Naruto formed his signature cross-shaped hand seal. Shadow clone jutsu, he whispered. Chakra flaring briefly as 6 perfect duplicates materialized around them, each understanding their role without verbal instruction. The clones disappeared into the undergrowth, circling to approach the clearing from different angles. Erza reequipped again, her flight armor shimmering and reforming into Heaven's Wheel, sacrificing some speed for overwhelming offensive capability. Ready, she asked, swords materializing around her in a deadly constellation. Naruto's response was a confident smile, crimson-black energy swirling around his hands. Let's show them why you don't mess with Fairy Tail. They launched their assault with perfect synchronization. Naruto's clones erupted from the tree line simultaneously, each targeting a different Crimson Fang member with techniques that combined shinobi unpredictability with Dragon Slayer power. At the same moment, Erza soared skyward, her silhouette momentarily eclipsing the moon before she descended toward the clearing's center where Vasilia directed the ritual. Dance, my blades, Erza commanded, sending a spiral of swords hurtling toward the dark mage. Vasilia's spatial magic barely formed a defensive barrier in time, warp-ing the trajectories of most blades but missing one that scored a shallow cut across her shoulder. Blood dripped from the wound, disrupting her concentration as pain registered. Fairy Tail, she snarled, recognizing Erza's distinctive armor and magic. You're becoming a serious irritation. Around the perimeter, chaos erupted as Naruto's clones engaged the other Crimson Fang members. Each clone employed different tactics, one using pure taijutsu to physically separate a blood mage from his monolith, another creating a second generation of clones to overwhelm with numbers, a third channeling Dragon God Slayer magic to counter blood magic directly. The real Naruto approached from the forest floor, targeting the ritual components laid out between monoliths, complex arrangements of crystals, inscribed metal discs, and vials of substances that pulsed with unnatural light. With precise applications of concentrated magical energy, he systematically destroyed each component, eliminating the supporting structure of Vasilia's dimensional working. Stop him! Vasilia screamed, attempting to disengage from Erza to intercept Naruto. The focal alignments are irreplaceable. Erza wouldn't allow it, her blades forming an impenetrable barrier between Vasilia and her target. Your fight is with me, she stated coldly, launching another coordinated attack that forced the Dark Mage to focus entirely on defense. As Naruto destroyed the final ritual component, a crystal orb containing what appeared to be actual starlight, he sensed a dangerous spike in magical energy from Vasilia. Glancing upward, he saw her face contorted with fury and desperation, her hands forming complex gestures unlike any she'd used previously. Erza, she's channeling something big, he warned, already moving to support his partner. Dimensional fracture. Void collapse. Vasilia screamed, abandoning all pretense of control for raw destructive potential. Space itself seemed to crack around her, jagged lines absolute darkness splitting the air like shattered glass. Each fracture radiated unstable energy, threatening to consume everything within the clearing, including Vasilia herself, whose body showed signs of magical overload. Veins glowing visibly beneath her skin. She's killing herself to take us with her, Erza realized, re-equipping instantly into adamantine armor for maximum defensive capability. She crossed her massive shields before her, creating a barrier that might withstand the dimensional collapse. But Naruto saw the flaw in this approach immediately. Erza could protect herself, but the fractures were spreading too quickly, too chaotically to be contained by defensive magic alone. They needed to neutralize the source. Drawing on everything he'd learned about his Dragon God Slayer abilities, Naruto reached for the hunger at the core of his new magic, the power to consume draconic energy in any form. Dimensional magic had draconic origins according to the monolith's ancient knowledge. Theoretically, he should be able to. Dragon God's devouring maw, he roared, instinctively naming the technique as it formed. Crimson-black energy exploded outward from his body, forming the spectral jaws of a massive dragon that encompassed the entire clearing. With a single massive inhalation, the energy construct began to consume Vasilia's dimensional fractures, drawing the volatile magic into Naruto's own body. Pain unlike anything he'd experienced before tore through his system as raw dimensional energy flooded his magical pathways. His skin burned as the scale patterns extended further up his arms, across his shoulders, and onto his chest. His vision fractured temporarily, showing him glimpses of multiple realities simultaneously. Hold on, Kurama growled, using H's own energy to stabilize Naruto's overwhelmed system. Your body's adapting, but too much too fast will tear you apart. Through sheer force of will, Naruto maintained the technique until the last fracture disappeared, consumed by the dragon's maw. When finally he released the magic, he collapsed to one knee, body trembling with the effort of containing what he'd absorbed. Erza was beside him instantly, adamantine armor dissolving into her standard attire as she supported his weight. Naruto, are you all right? I'll live, he managed, though his voice sounded strange even to his own ears, deeper, with a resonant quality that hadn't been present before. The dimensional energy, it's changing me faster than before. Around them, the clearing had gone silent. Vasilia lay unconscious at the ritual's center, magical burnout having rendered her comatose. The other Crimson Fang members were either similarly incapacitated or had fled when their leader's final desperate attack began. Naruto's remaining clones dispelled themselves, their memories flowing back to him with confirmation that the threat had been neutralized. We need to get you back to Magnolia, Erza decided, concern evident in her usually stoic expression. Master Makarov should examine what's happening to your magic. With surprising gentleness, she helped Naruto to his feet, allowing him to lean on her strength. GTH as they began the journey back toward Shiratsum. The monoliths behind them stood dormant once more, their secrets temporarily secured from those who would misuse them. Sorry about the mess, Naruto joked weakly, gesturing toward the clearing's devastated state. Not exactly the clean resolution we planned. You saved lives, Erza countered firmly. Including mine. Adamantine armor might not have withstood a full-dimensional collapse. She looked at him directly, moonlight illuminating her scarlet hair like a halo. Thank you. The simple sincerity of her gratitude affected Naruto more deeply than expected. In that moment, despite the pain of transformation and the uncertainty of his future in this world, he felt something he hadn't since arriving in Earthland, a sense of rightness, of belonging, of fighting alongside someone who truly saw him. Partners look out for each other, he replied with a genuine smile, straightening slightly as his strength began to return. Besides, I couldn't let anything happen to Fairy Tale's Titania, could I? Erza blinked in surprise at his use of her nickname. You've been talking to Mirajan, I see. She might have mentioned a few things, Naruto admitted. Though she neglected to explain why they call you Queen of the Fairies. A long story, Erza said dismissively, though a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Perhaps for another mission. I'll hold you to that, Naruto promised as they continued through the moonlit forest, their path illuminated by the soft glow of Erza's summoned sword. Behind them, the monolith stood silent sentinel over a clearing that had nearly become a doorway between worlds. And within Naruto, new power settled into his being, dimensional magic absorbed and transformed by Dragon God Slayer abilities, pushing him further along the path of draconic evolution. What that evolution might ultimately mean for his hopes of returning to Konoha, neither could say. But as they made their way back toward Shiratsum together, one thing became increasingly clear to both wizard and shinobi: whatever paths lay ahead, they would face them as partners bound by something deeper than guild marks or mission assignments. The scarlet-haired warrior and the dragon god slayer. A connection that transcended dimensions, just as Ryoshin had foreseen. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, The Guild of Fairies. Morning sunlight streamed through Fairy Tale's stained glass windows, painting multicolored patterns across the guildhall's wooden floor. 3 weeks had passed since Naruto's first mission with Erza, 3 weeks of integration, training, and gradually finding his footing in this new world. The initial strangeness of Earthland had begun to fade, replaced by tentative familiarity as he established routines and relationships within the guild. Today marked a significant milestone, officially receiving his Fairy Tale mark. Though he'd been accepted from the moment Makarov welcomed him, the formalization had waited until after his return from Shiratsum and subsequent recovery from absorbing Vassilia's dimensional magic. Have you decided where you want it? Mirajan asked, approaching with the guild stamp in hand. Her perpetual smile carried genuine warmth as she gestured toward his body. Most members choose somewhere visible, a statement of pride in belonging to Fairy Tale. Naruto considered the question seriously. In Konoha, his headband had represented both village allegiance and personal achievement, earned through trial and commitment. This mark would carry similar significance, albeit in a world he'd never intended to join. Here, he decided finally, extending his right shoulder, the one not covered by scale markings that had spread since the dimensional incident. Orange, if that's possible. Mirajan nodded, adjusting the magical stamp. Orange suits you, she observed, pressing the seal against his skin. Though I'm curious, why that location specifically? It balances this, Naruto explained, indicating the draconic scales along his opposite arm. 2 aspects of who I am now, Fairy Tale Wizard and Dragon God Slayer. As the stamp made contact, something unexpected happened. Instead of simply transferring the guild emblem, the mark flared with brilliant golden light that momentarily outshone the morning sun. Mirajan stepped back in surprise as the GL spread outward before settling into Naruto's skin, leaving the Fairy Tale symbol in shimmering orange that seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. Well, she breathed, eyes wide. That's certainly never happened before. Curious guild members gathered around, drawn by the unusual display. Naruto examined the mark with equal surprise, feeling a strange resonance between it and his Dragon God Slayer magic. The guild mark is partially magical in nature, Makarov explained, materializing beside them with his uncanny ability to appear whenever something interesting occurred. It establishes a connection to Fairy Tale's foundational magic. In your case, it seems that connection is enthusiastic. Is that bad? Naruto asked, noting how the mark continued to shimmer faintly. Makarov stroked his mustache thoughtfully. Not bad, necessarily. Just another indication that your magic interacts uniquely with this world's established systems. His eyes twinkled with characteristic mischief. Fairy Tale specializes in the unusual. After all, you're in good company. As if to prove his point, Natsu chose that moment to crash through the nearby table during an animated demonstration of his latest fire technique to an unimpressed Gray. Wooden splinters flew in all directions as the Dragon Slayer rolled to his feet, undeterred by minor setbacks like furniture destruction or physics. Naruto, he exclaimed, noticing the new guild mark. You're official now. Fight me. Perhaps allow him to enjoy membership for 5 minutes before challenging him to combat, Erza suggested dryly, airing behind Natsu with perfect timing to grab his collar before he could launch himself at the newest guild member. But Erza, Natsu whined. He's got new dragon powers since absorbing that weird magic. I need to see how they compare to mine. Despite his outward exasperation, Naruto detected genuine curiosity beneath Natsu's challenge. Since his return from Shiratsum, both established dragon slayers had shown increasing interest in his developing abilities, especially after Makarov had explained the dimensional magic absorption. Training grounds. 1 hour, Naruto proposed, finding hymns. Elf looking forward to testing his enhanced powers in a controlled environment. I could use the practice with these new abilities anyway. Natsu's face lit up with pure excitement. Yes, I'm fired up now. As the Fire Dragon Slayer raced off, presumably to prepare or perhaps simply to burn excess energy, Erza gave Naruto an appraising look. Your recovery seems complete, she observed. The Dimensional magic has integrated with your Dragon God Slayer abilities. Mostly, he confirmed. Kurama says my magical pathways have stabilized, though the physical changes are still progressing. He indicated the scale patterns that now extended across his left shoulder and partially up his neck. They suit you, Murajan commented with surprising sincerity. Distinguished rather than frightening. Before Naruto could respond to the unexpected compliment, Lucy approached their group, Levi close behind. The celestial wizard carried several large tomes while the script mage balanced a precariously tall stack of scrolls. We found something, Lucy announced triumphantly, about the dragon god. Since his arrival, several guild members had taken personal interest in researching his situation. Lucy and Levi had enthusiastically volunteered to comb through Fairy Tail's extensive archives for references to Ryoshin or Dragon God Slayer magic, spending hours in the guild's library section. It wasn't easy, Levi admitted as they deposited their findings on a nearby table. Most references were fragmentary at best, often dismissed as myth even within texts about Dragon Slayer origins. But this, Lucy continued, carefully opening a particularly ancient-looking tome, is different. It's a pre-Zerf account of the dragon hierarchies, written by someone who apparently witnessed them firsthand. The gathered group leaned forward as Lucy indicated a faded illustration, a massive golden crimson dragon with distinctive cosmic patterning along its scales. Even rendered in simple ink, the creature projected majesty that transcended artistic limitations. Ryoshin, Naruto whispered, instantly recognizing the dragon from his dream. The first dragon, Levi read from the ancient text. He who breathed magic into the void and gave form to the formless. From his scales came the elements, from his breath came life, from his wisdom came the separation of realms. She looked up at Naruto with renewed fascination. This describes him as not just the first dragon, but the creator of dragon magic itself, possibly even the progenitor of all magical systems. Makarov's expression grew increasingly serious as he examined the text. If accurate, this suggests Dragon God Slayer magic wouldn't just be another form of Dragon Slayer magic, but its ultimate source, the magic from which all other Slayer abilities derived. Which explains why Natsu and Gajeel feel that weird resonance with your magic, Lucy reasoned. Their Dragon Slayer abilities are essentially distant descendants of your power. Naruto absorbed this information with mixed emotions. On one hand, it helped explain what was happening to him and why his body continued transforming. On the other, it reinforced how fundamentally he'd been changed by his displacement to Earthland, perhaps permanently. There's more, Levi continued, carefully turning to another section. According to this account, Ryoshin didn't just teach magic. He physically altered those he chose, sharing his blood to create the first generation of what would later be called Dragon Slayers. Blood inheritance, Erza murmured, glancing at Naruto's scale markings with new understanding. Which aligns with what Ryoshin told me in my dream, Naruto confirmed. That the Sage of Six Paths, the founder of ninjutsu in my world, carried Dragon blood that was passed down alongside chakra. Your dimensional transfer must have activated that dormant heritage, Makarov reasoned. The magical environment of Earthland providing the catalyst that your native world couldn't. But why now? Murajan asked, voicing the question that hung unspoken in the air. If this connection existed all along, why would Naruto specifically manifest his abilities when others from his bloodline presumably didn't? A thoughtful silence fell as they considered this crucial point. It was Lucy who eventually offered a compelling theory. The nine-tailed fox, she suggested. glancing at Naruto for permission to continue. When he nodded, she elaborated. You explained that you contain a powerful entity with its own unique energy signature. What that combination, your inherited dragon blood plus the Nine Tails power, created the perfect conditions for Dragon God Slayer magic to awaken during dimensional transfer. She's surprisingly insightful, Kurama commented within Naruto's mind. My chakra has always had unusual properties, particularly regarding transformation and adaptation. It's not unreasonable that it could have accelerated the awakening of dormant dragon traits. Kurama agrees, Naruto relayed. He thinks his chakra might have catalyzed the transformation. Then perhaps your arrival in Earthland wasn't merely accident but convergence. Makarov suggested, his expression contemplative. Multiple factors aligning precisely. Your heritage, your tailed beast, the dimensional thinning, even Acnologia's presence to trigger your defensive awakening. The implications hung heavily in the air. If true, it suggested a level of predestination that made Naruto uncomfortable, as though cosmic forces had orchestrated his displacement for purposes beyond his understanding or consent. Sensing his disquiet, Erza deftly shifted the conversation. These discoveries are significant, but perhaps best explored through practical application rather than pure theory. She nodded toward the guildhall doors. Natsu is undoubtedly destroying something in anticipation of your training session. We should proceed before his patience expires entirely. The suggestion successfully lightened the mood, drawing chuckles from the gathered wizards. As they prepared to head toward the training grounds, Miragen touched Naruto's arm lightly. Don't let the research overwhelm you, she advised, her usual cheerfulness tempered with genuine understanding. Dragon Slayer or not, dimensional traveler or not, you're Naruto of fairy tale now. She indicated his newly placed guild mark with a gentle smile. That's the identity that matters most here. The simple affirmation eased something tight in Naruto's chest, a tension he hadn't fully acknowledged until it began to release. Since arriving in Earthland, he'd been defined primarily by what had happened to him and what he'd become. Miragen's words offered a different perspective, the freedom to define himself through choices and relationships rather than circumstances or power. Thanks, Mira, he replied, using her preferred name for the first time and earning a brightened smile in response. As they made their way toward the training grounds where Natsu undoubtedly waited, Naruto felt a shifting in his perspective. The mark on his shoulder represented more than guild membership. It offered belonging without demanding that he abandon his identity as a Konoha shinobi. Perhaps he could be both, carrying his past while embracing this unexpected present. He sustained him as they stepped into the sunlight, ready to explore through action what words and research could only partially define. Fairy Tale's training grounds stretched across several acres behind the Guildhall, a scarred landscape bearing testimony to the destructive creativity of its members. Scorched earth from Natsu's flames neighbored ice formations from Gray's training. Metal Kes protruded from areas where Gajil practiced, while precision-cut patterns marked Erza's preferred section. A substantial crowd had gathered to witness Naruto's first official training session as a guild member. Word of his unusual magic had spread throughout Magnolia, attracting curiosity from both within and beyond Fairy Tale's ranks. Natsu bounced impatiently in the center of a reinforced clearing, flames occasionally erupting from his fists in excited bursts. Beside him stood Gajil, arms crossed and expression carefully neutral despite his evident interest in observing another Slayer's abilities. Finally, Natsu exclaimed as Naruto approached. I thought you'd changed your mind. It's been exactly 57 minutes since he agreed to train with you, Lucy pointed out from the sidelines. Clearly accustomed to Natsu's elastic relationship with time and patience, Naruto rolled his shoulders, feeling the Dragon God Slayer magic stirring beneath his skin, more responsive, eager than before absorbing the dimensional energy. Let's keep this constructive, he suggested. I'm still learning the parameters of these abilities. Sure, Natsu agreed with a dismissive wave. Constructive destruction is my specialty. Makarov stepped between them, assuming the role of moderator. A few ground rules, he announced, eyeing both Slayers sternly. This is training, not combat. The objective is skill development and magical understanding. Excessive property damage will result in appropriate compensation from your mission rewards. Natsu's enthusiasm dimmed slightly at the financial threat, while nervous laughter rippled through the spectators who had witnessed the Dragon Slayer's typical training bill. Let's begin with fundamentals, Makarov continued. Natsu, demonstrate basic Dragon Slayer techniques. Roar, Talon, Iron Fist. Naruto will attempt corresponding applications of Dragon God Slayer magic. Stepping back to a safe distance, Natsu grinned as flames engulfed his fists. Watch carefully. Fire Dragon's Iron Fist. He punched forward, sending a concentrated blast of fire magic that incinerated a training dummy 50 feet away. Now Talons, Makarov directed. Fire Dragon's Talon. Flames extended from Natsu's leg as he executed a devastating roundhouse kick that sliced through reinforced wooden posts like butter. Finally, he drew back his head, chest expanding. Fire Dragon's Roar. A massive torrent of flames erupted from his mouth, scorching a wide path across the training field. When the smoke cleared, Natsu turned expectantly to Naruto. Your turn, God Slayer. The challenge wasn't just bravado. Naruto recognized genuine curiosity in Natsu's eyes. The Fire Dragon Slayer wanted to understand how their magics differed, Seki. In connection to this unexpected relative of his lost dragon parents' teachings. Drawing on the instinctual knowledge that had been developing since his awakening, Naruto focused on the crimson-black energy within. Unlike chakra, which required specific hand signs and established pathways, Dragon God Slayer magic responded directly to intention and visualization. Dragon God's Crushing Fist, he called. His arm instantly engulfed in swirling energy that formed a spectral dragon's claw around his hand. The punch connected with a training post, and instead of simply breaking it, the magic seemed to consume it, reducing the reinforced wood to particles that were absorbed into the energy construct. Murmurs spread through the watching crowd as Naruto continued. Dragon God's Rending Talon. The energy shifted to his leg as he executed a sweeping kick reminiscent of shinobi taijutsu but infused with consuming draconic power. The attack didn't just cut through its target but disintegrated it entirely, leaving nothing but scattered motes of light that were drawn into Naruto's magic. For the final demonstration, Naruto drew a deep breath, feeling power gather in his lungs in a way completely foreign to chakra techniques. Dragon God's Roar. The blast that erupted from his mouth wasn't elemental like Natsu's flames but rather pure draconic force, crimson-black energy that distorted the very air it passed through. When it struck the distant hillside, the impact created a perfect spherical absence, as though that section of reality had been consumed rather than destroyed. Silence fell across the training ground as the implications registered. Unlike normal Dragon Slayer magic that manipulated elements, Naruto's abilities seemed to affect the fundamental nature of whatever the Y encountered, consuming rather than damaging, absorbing rather than destroying. That's, Natsu began, for once at a loss for words. Primordial, Gajiel finished unexpectedly, his usual gruffness, replaced by something approaching reverence. Not derived from elements but from the source that created elements. Makarov nodded gravely. As we suspected from the research, Dragon God Slayer Magi, C appears to be the progenitor form from which all other Slayer abilities descended, diluted an element specialized through generations. Natsu approached Naruto with uncharacteristic seriousness, studying the fading crimson-black energy with intense focus. When you use it, he asked quietly, what does it feel like? The question surprised Naruto with its depth. Like remembering something ancient. He answered honestly. Not just power but knowledge, as though my body recognizes patterns it was always meant to follow. Natsu nodded slowly. Igniel said something similar about Dragon Mag. I see. That dragons don't learn magic so much as remember what's encoded in their being. Which supports the blood inheritance theory, Levi commented from the sidelines, frantically taking notes. If R. Yuashin shared his blood with the Sage of Six Paths, that draconic essence would have carried intrinsic magical knowledge dormant until activated. Let's test interaction, Erza suggested, practical as always. Natsu. Direct an attack at Naruto. Controlled power, not full force. Natsu's usual exuberance returned at the prospect of more direct engagement. Ready. At Naruto's nod, he inhaled deeply. Fire Dragon's Roar. The concentrated flame blast shot toward Naruto, who instinctively raised his hands rather than dodging. As the fire approached, his Dragon God Slayer magic activated Autumn. Adequately, his mouth opening as the crimson-black energy formed a vacuum that pulled Natsu's flames directly into it. The sensation was indescribable, heat and power flowing into him, not burning but fueling, like drinking liquid energy. Naruto felt his magical reserves expanding as he consumed Natsu's attack completely, leaving the Fire Dragon Slayer staring in shock. "You ate my fire," Natsu stated the obvious. Equal parts impressed and indignant. "But you're not a Fire Dragon Slayer. Dragon God Slayer," Gajeel corrected thoughtfully. The text said Ryoshin created the elements from his scales. Makes sense, his Slayer magic could consume any element, they all originated from him. "My turn," the Iron Dragon Slayer decided, stepping forward. Iron Dragon's Lance. Demon Logs. Multiple iron projectiles shot toward Naruto, who repeated the process, consuming the metal attacks as easily as he had Natsu's flames. The Dragon God Slayer magic made no distinction between elements, absorbing both with equal efficiency. "Fascinating," Makarov murmured. "True omnivorous Slayer abilities, precisely what one would expect from the Progenitor magic." Naruto felt the consumed magic settling within him, enhancing his own power while retaining its distinctive properties. "I can feel both fire and iron energies inside me now," he explained. "Separate from but compatible with my own magic. Can you use them?" Natsu asked eagerly. Can you do fire attacks now?" It was a logical question. After all, conventional dragon slayers gained nourishment and power from consuming their respective elements. Focusing inward, Naruto attempted to isolate the fire energy he'd absorbed, directing it toward his hand as he'd seen Natsu do countless times. Crimson-black flames erupted around Hai's fingers, recognizably fire magic but infused with the distinctive essence of Dragon God Slayer power. Similarly, when he concentrated on the iron energy, metallic scales formed along his forearm, though darker and more intricate than Gajeel's version. "He can assimilate and repurpose any dragon-based magic," Erza observed, immediately grasping the tactical implications. "Not just consume it for power but adapt and utilize its properties." The discovery sent ripples of excitement and concern through the gathered wizards. Such versatility had obvious advantages, but also raised questions about limitations and potential consequences of absorbing too many magical types. "How does it affect your original abilities?" Murajan asked thoughtfully. "Your shadow clones and other techniques?" It was a perceptive question that Naruto had been exploring privately. "They're evolving," he acknowledged, demonstrating by creating several shadow clones that materialized with the same draconic markings he now bore. "They carry the Dragon God Slayer magic too, though at reduced capacity." To further illustrate, he formed a Rasengan, but unlike the pure chakra version from his world, this one contained swirling threads of crimson-black energy that occasionally formed miniature dragon silhouettes within the spiraling sphere. Dragon God Spiraling Sphere, he named it instinctively, the Tekken. IQ's new identity asserting itself in his consciousness. The training session continued for nearly 2 hours, with different guild members volunteering to help explore aspects of Naruto's developing abilities. Gray's ice magic proved equally consumable, as did Juvia's water attacks. Levy's solid script magic offered interesting results. The Dragon God Slayer magic could absorb the manifestations but not the foundational script itself, suggesting limitations regarding certain magical frameworks. Throughout the experiments, Naruto noticed Wendy, the Sky Dragon Slayer, watching with particular intensity from a distance. Neither participating nor leaving. When they finally took a break, he approached the young wizard, curious about her reserved observation. "You didn't want to test your magic against mine?" he asked gently. Wendy fidgeted with her long blue hair, suddenly shy. "It's not that, it's just..." She hesitated before continuing in a rush. "Your magic feels like Grandini." The admission caught Naruto off guard. "Your dragon parent." "How?" "Not exactly like her," Wendy clarified. "But similar, healing, nurturing, but also ancient and powerful. When you use Dragon God Slayer magic, it resonates with my sky magic differently than it does with Natsu's fire or Gajeel's iron." She looked up at him with earnest eyes. "It feels like home." The simple confession struck Naruto deeply. This young dragon slayer, who had lost her dragon parent just as Natsu and Gajeel had, sensed something familial in his magic, something that connected to her most precious memories. kneeling to meet her at eye level. Naruto smiled warmly. Maybe Ryoshin and Grandini were connected somehow. The texts say he was the first dragon, perhaps an ancestor to all dragons including those who raised the dragon slayers. Wendy's expression brightened at this possibility. Like a great-great-grandfather dragon. That would make sense why your magic feels familiar but different. And why Natsu and Gajeel feel that resonance too. Naruto agreed, watching the two male dragon slayers arguing energetically nearby. Though they express it through challenges rather than conversation. Wendy giggled, her earlier hesitation melting away. That's just how they communicate. Natsu especially. Fighting is how he connects with people he respects. I've noticed, Naruto replied dryly, remembering the daily challenges since his arrival. Yet there was something nostalgic about Natsu's enthusiastic combat invitations. They reminded him of his own younger self challenging Sasuke, seeking acknowledgement through rivalry. As the training session wound down and guild members began returning to the hall for refreshments, Murajan approached Naruto with a communication lacrima in hand. Master Makarov wants to see you in his office. She informed him. He's been in contact with the Magic Council regarding the dimensional incidents in your unique situation. Naruto nodded, having expected this development. The governing body of Earthland's magical community would naturally take interest in interdimensional travelers with unprecedented magical abilities. Following Murajan through the guild hall, he found himself oddly unconcerned about the council's scrutiny, perhaps because facing bureaucratic oversight felt refreshingly normal after weeks of cosmic uncertainty. Makarov's office reflected its occupant's personality, organized chaos with meaningful structure beneath apparent disorder. Towering stacks of paperwork, much of it regarding property damage from guild missions, framed a massive desk where the diminutive master sat cross-legged, examining a glowing projection from a large lacrima crystal. "Ah, Naruto," he greeted, dismissing the projection with a wave. "Thank you for coming. Impressive display at training today, though I suspect we've only glimpsed the surface of your capabilities." "I'm still discovering them myself," Naruto admitted, taking the offered seat. Arama says the integration is accelerating since absorbing Vassilia's dimensional magic. Makarov nodded thoughtfully, which relates to why I called you here. The Magic Council has been monitoring magical anomalies throughout Fury, several appearing simultaneously with your arrival in Earthland. More dimensional tears? Naruto asked with immediate concern. Fluctuations rather than tears, Makarov clarified. Minor disturbances in the magical atmosphere, centered around locations with historical significance to dragon activity. Nothing as severe as what you encountered in Shiratsum, but following similar patterns. The implication was clear enough. They think my presence is causing these fluctuations. Not causing, necessarily, Makarov corrected carefully. Perhaps resonating with pre-existing weak points between dimensions. Your Dragon God Slayer magic appears attuned to such boundaries, likely a protective feature designed to maintain separation between realms. And the Council's position on this? Naruto asked directly, familiar enough with governing bodies to expect complications. Makarov's expression became more serious. Mixed. Some members view you as a potential threat requiring monitoring or containment. Others see scientific and magical research opportunities. A few recognize the strategic value of having someone with your abilities allied with legal guilds rather than dark ones. And your recommendation? Naruto respected the guild master's judgment enough to ask outright. That you remain with Fairy Tail under my supervision while continuing to develop control over your magic. Makarov stated firmly. Additionally, that you participate in investigating these fluctuations alongside established guild members, particularly Team Natsu, whose combined capabilities complement your own. It was a sensible approach that balanced multiple concerns while maintaining Naruto's autonomy, exactly what he would have expected from the shrewd guild master. There's another reason for suggesting Team Natsu specifically, Makarov continued, his expression shifting subtly. Erza reported your exceptional compatibility during the Shiratsum mission. Arlie acknowledges such natural partnership, the last being with Mistogen, who shared your interdimensional background. The comparison surprised Naruto, knowing how highly regarded the mysterious M.Y.'s. Togen had been within Fairy Tail despite his limited interaction with most members. Beyond that, Makarov added, having multiple dragon slayers present during investigations may provide insights regarding these fluctuations connection to dragon magic specifically. Natsu, Happy, Gray, Lucy, and Erza provide a balanced team with complementary abilities to support yours. The assignment made tactical sense, but Naruto suspected there was more behind the guild master's reasoning than purely strategic considerations. Makarov had observed enough to recognize how quickly Naruto had formed connections with Team Natsu's members, particularly Erza, whose parallel path Ryoshin had specifically mentioned. When would we start? Naruto asked, implicitly accepting the arrangement. Tomorrow, Makarov replied. A significant fluctuation has been detected near the ancient ruins of Dragonfall Canyon, historically the site of a major battle between dragons and humans centuries ago. Your team will investigate its nature and determine whether intervention is required. The mission parameters were straightforward enough, though Naruto suspected the execution would be anything but, especially with Natsu involved. Still, the prospect of purposeful action appealed after weeks of reactive adaptation to his new circumstances. I'll be ready, he assured the guild master, rising to leave. Makarov stopped him with a raised hand. One more thing, Naruto. These fluctuations, he hesitated uncharacteristically. There's a possibility they might offer insights regarding dimensional traversal. Perhaps even pathways back to your world. Quote, the statement hung in the air between them, a reminder that despite his integration into fairy tale, Naruto's presence in Earthland remained fundamentally displaced. The possibility of returning to Konoha, however remote, couldn't be dismissed from consideration. I understand, Naruto acknowledged, emotions carefully balanced. Any information we discover belongs to the guild and the council, regardless of personal implications. Makarov's eyes softened with unexpected compassion. That wasn't my meaning. I simply wanted you to be prepared for what you might discover. Hope or disappointment, often equally challenging to manage. The kindness behind the warning touched Naruto more deeply than he'd anticipated. Thank you, Master Makarov. Now then, the guild master continued with deliberate lightness, I believe Mirajan has prepared a proper celebration for our newest member. Best not keep her waiting. She can be quite formidable when her hospitality is delayed. The dismissal was gentle but clear. As Naruto descended to the main guild hall, he found himself contemplating how quickly Fairy Tail had come to feel familiar, its rhythms and relationships. Its boisterous chaos and underlying loyalty, all reminiscent of what he'd valued most in Konoha. The hall had been transformed during his meeting with Makarov, tables rearranged, decorations hung, and a large banner proclaiming, "Welcome Naruto," suspended above the bar. Guild members raised glasses in greeting as he entered, their acceptance warming something within him that had been cold since his displacement. There he is, Natsu shouted above the general noise. The dragon god slayer of Fairy Tail. The title still felt strange, an identity he'd neither sought nor expected, but as cheers erupted around him, Naruto allowed himself to embrace it, at least for tonight. Whatever tomorrow's mission might reveal about dimensional fluctuations or potential pathways home, this meant belonged fully to his present rather than his past or future. Mirajan appeared at his side, offering a drink with her characteristic smile. To new beginnings, she proposed softly. Naruto raised the glass in acknowledgement, his guild mark catching the light as he did, orange and shimmering, marking him as both dragon and fairy, both displaced and belonging to Fairy Tail, he replied, N.D. drank deeply to the chorus of approving voices. Dawn painted Magnolia's eastern horizon in watercolor hues as Team Natsu assembled at the train station. Despite the early hour, Natsu bubbled WITH characteristic enthusiasm, at least until boarding time approached and his expression shifted to preemptive nausea at the thought of transportation. Every single time, Lucy sighed, watching the Dragon Slayer's complexion already taking on a greenish tint. You'd think after years of missions, his body would adapt. Dragon Slayer physiology, Happy explained sagely, hovering beside them with tiny packed bag. Their enhanced senses make their inner ear super sensitive to motion. Naruto considered this information with mild concern. Does that mean I'll develop motion sickness too? As a dragon god slayer? Possibly, Erza acknowledged, efficiently directing porters to load her mountain of luggage. Though Wendy doesn't suffer as severely, and Laxus seems to manage better than Natsu or Gajeel. Individual variation exists. Let's hope you take after Wendy then, Gray suggested dryly. One motion-sick dragon slayer per team is more than enough. The casual inclusion in per M didn't escape Naruto's notice, another subtle indication of how naturally Fairy Tail had incorporated him into their existing structures. What might have taken months or years in the hierarchical Hinobi world had happened almost effortlessly here. Boarding the train to Dragonfall Canyon proceeded with well-practiced routine, Lucy and Gray helping the already wobbly Natsu while Erza handled logistics with railroad staff. Happy provided running commentary on Natsu's suffering with the cheerful sadism only a best friend could manage, his blue wings occasionally batting Natsu's face for emphasis. Their private compartment offered comfortable seating and excellent views of the countryside, though Natsu appeared incapable of appreciating either as he immediately collapsed across one bench, moaning dramatically. Perhaps you should try Wendy's Troya spell, Erza suggested as she settled opposite him, casually repositioning his prostrate form to make room for herself. Doesn't work anymore, Natsu groaned. Arm flung across his eyes. Built up. Resistance, gonna die. Drama queen, Gray muttered, somehow having lost his shirt between the platform and the compartment. As the train lurched into motion, Naruto braced himself for potential discomfort, but beyond a momentary disorientation, his equilibrium remained stable. Kurama's presence might be providing additional stability. Or perhaps the Dragon God Slayer's physiology differed enough from conventional Dragon Slayers to avoid this particular weakness. You seem fine, Lucy observed with evident relief. Thank goodness. Dealing with two incapacitated Dragon Slayers would make missions significantly more complicated. With Natsu temporarily subdued by transportation, the journey provided opportunity for mission briefing. Erza produced a detailed map of their destination, spreading it across the compartment's small table. Dragonfall Canyon lies approximately 50 kilometers northeast of Crocus, she explained, indicating their route. Geologically unique, massive stone formations carved by ancient magical battles rather than natural erosion. It was the site of the third dragon-human conflict, Lucy added, her knowledge of history surfacing. Where dragons supporting human coexistence fought alongside early dragon slayers against anti-human factions. The fluctuations center here, Erza continued, pointing to a specific section of the canyon. Around ruins believed to be a dragon temple predating human settlement in the region. Local reports describe unusual magical phenomena, time distortions, spontaneous elemental manifestations. Wildlife exhibiting altered behaviors. Sounds familiar, Naruto noted, recognizing similarities to the anomalies he'd investigated in Konoha before his displacement. Dimensional boundaries thinning in areas with historical magical significance. Gray leaned forward, studying the map with professional interest. Any Dark Guild activity reported? After Shiratsum, we should assume others might be investigating these fluctuations for their own purposes. Nothing confirmed, Erza replied. But council surveillance is limited in the canyon, too many ICAL interference patterns for reliable monitoring. We should proceed with appropriate caution. As the briefing continued, Naruto found himself impressed by Team Natsu's operational approach. Beneath their seemingly chaotic exterior lay genuine strategic competence, each member contributing specialized knowledge and perspectives while Erza skillfully coordinated their planning. The dynamic reminded him of Konoha's best Jonin teams, though with distinctly fairy tale flair. What about you, Naruto? Lucy asked suddenly. Does any of this sound familiar from your world? Were there similar ruins or dragon temples? The question prompted thoughtful consideration. Not dragons specifically, but there were places where boundaries between dimensions seemed naturally thinner. Mount Myoboku, the Uzumaki clan's homeland. Certain ancient battlefields where massive chakra had been expended. Consistent patterns across dimensions, Erza observed, suggesting fundamental principles governing multiversal structure rather than world-specific phenomena. Which means these fluctuations might provide information applicable to interdimensional travel generally, Lucy concluded, glancing at Naruto. With understanding of the personal implications. The conversation paused as refreshments arrived, the distraction momentarily reviving Natsu before the train's continued motion sent him collapsing back into transport-induced misery. As they continued discussing tactical approaches for the canyon investigation, Naruto noticed Erza occasionally studying him with thoughtful consideration. "Something on your mind?" he asked during a natural break in planning. "I was considering your combat integration," she explained matter-of-factly. "Your shadow clones provide exceptional reconnaissance capabilities, while your Dragon God Slayer magic offers both offensive power and defensive absorption. Combined with your shinobi tactical background, you're trying to optimize team configuration," Naruto realized, recognizing the analytical approach from his own leadership training. Erza nodded, pleased by his understanding. "Each member brings unique advantages. Natsu's raw destructive capability, Gray's versatile creation magic, Lucis' diverse spirits, Happy's aerial support. Your abilities introduce new tactical possibilities worth exploring systematically." "Always the strategist," Lucy commented with fond exasperation. "Not everything needs military-grade planning, Erza. Proper preparation prevents poor performance," Erza replied with absolute conviction, as though quoting sacred text. The exchange drew a genuine laugh from Naruto, perhaps his most unguarded moment since arriving in Earthland. Something about their dynamic reminded him powerfully of Team 7 in their better moments. When Sakura's practicality balanced Sasuke's intensity and his own spontaneity. The remainder of the journey passed pleasantly, landscapes transitioning from Magnolia's lush surroundings to rugged terrain as they approached the canyon region. When they finally disembarked at Rockfall Station, the nearest rail access to their destination, Natsu's miraculous recovery provided its own entertainment. "Land," he exclaimed, literally kissing the platform before bouncing upright with fully restored energy. "I'm fired up now. Let's find these dragon ruins." The small settlement surrounding the station offered little beyond basic supplies and lodging for travelers visiting the canyon. After arranging transportation for Erza's impressive luggage collection requiring 2 separate carts, and causing visible distress to the local porter, Team Natsu set out on the final leg of their journey. The path to Dragonfall Canyon wound through increasingly stark landscape, vegetation growing as rocky outcroppings dominated the terrain. Even from a distance, the canyon itself presented an awesome spectacle, massive stone walls with formations that defied natural explanation, some resembling colossal dragon silhouettes frozen mid-battle. "They say the canyon was created in a single day," Lucy explained as they approached the rim. "When ancient dragons unleashed magic powerful enough to reshape the earth itself." "I believe it," Naruto replied, sensing residual magical energy permeating the entire area, faint but detectable even centuries later. His Dragon God Slayer magic responded to this draconic resonance, scales along his arm glowing faintly as they descended the switchback trail into the canyon depths. The fluctuation site lay near the canyon's heart, where stone formations created a natural amphitheater around ruins of unmistakably draconic design. Massive columns carved to resemble dragon tails supported fragments of what must once have been a magnificent domed structure. Faded inscriptions in an ancient language spiraled around these columns, partially obscured by time but still radiating subtle magical presence. "Dragon script," Natsu identified immediately, approaching one column with unusual reverence. "Igniel showed me examples once. Said it was the first written language, created by ancient dragons to record their knowledge." "Can you read it?" Gray asked, genuinely curious. Natsu shook his head regretfully. "Only a few words. Dragon slayers were taught spoken dragon language but rarely the written form. Something about humans not being ready for certain knowledge." As they explored the ruins' perimeter, Naruto felt increasing magical pressure against his senses, not painful but insistent, like standing in a strong current. The Dragon God Slayer magic within him responded with greater activation, crimson black energy occasionally manifesting visibly along his skin. "You're glowing," Happy observed helpfully, flying loops around Naruto with characteristic curiosity. "The ambient magic is activating his Dragon God Slayer abilities," Erza noted. "Similar to how Natsu responds to fire-rich environments." Indeed, Natsu had also showing signs of magical stimulation, scales becoming faintly visible along his forearms, senses visibly heightened as he explored with dragon-like intensity. "The fluctuation is centered there," Lucy pointed toward the temple's core, where fragmentary pillars surrounded a circular stone dais. Unlike the weathered ruins around it, the dais appeared perfectly preserved, its surface inscribed with intricate patterns that occasionally pulsed with subtle light. As they approached this central feature, the magical atmosphere intensified dramatically. The air itself seemed to thicken, colors shifting slightly toward blue-violet spectrums similar to what Naruto had witnessed during dimensional incidents in both worlds. Dragon gods gathering place, Natsu translated suddenly, stopping before a particularly well-preserved inscription. Where scales meet sky and blood remembers beginning. His brow furrowed with concentration. Something about returning or awakening. The dialect is ancient. Naruto stepped onto the dais cautiously, his dragon god slayer magic responding with immediate intensity. Crimson-black energy erupted around him involuntarily, forming a draconic silhouette T-hat towered momentarily before settling back into his body. The stone beneath his feet illuminated in response, intricate patterns glowing gold and crimson, spiraling outward from where he stood to encompass the entire circular platform. The inscriptions along surrounding pillars illuminated sequentially, as though the entire temple were awakening from long dormancy. "What did you do?" Gray demanded, ice magic materializing defensively around his hands. "Nothing intentional," Naruto assured them, remaining carefully still at the dais center. "The temple is responding to Dragon God Slayer Mag." "I see." Recognizing something familiar after centuries of inactivity. "It's not attacking," Erza observed, her initial combat readiness relaxing slightly as the magical activation continued without apparent hostility. "More like acknowledging." The illumination completed its circuit of the temple ruins, creating a complex three-dimensional magical framework visible as golden lines connecting various architectural elements. Within this framework, the air above the dais began to shimmer. Not the unstable tearing Naruto had witnessed in Shiratsum, but a deliberate, controlled thinning between dimensional boundaries. An image formed within the shimmer, ghostly but recognizable. A massive dragon with scales of burnished gold and crimson, eyes containing cosmic depth that seemed to gaze directly at the assembled wizards. Ryoshin. Naruto breathed, recognizing the dragon god from his dreams. The spectral dragon inclined its massive head in acknowledgement, though whether it truly perceived them or simply responded to programmed magical parameters remained unclear. When it spoke, the words resonated directly in their minds rather than through conventional sound. The circle completes. Blood returns to source as the barriers weaken. 7 gates stand between stability and chaos. The inheritor must choose, restoration or transformation. Asterisk. The cryptic message hung in the air as the dragon's image began to fade. The magical framework maintaining the apparition gradually losing coherence. "Wait," Natsu called impulsively, stepping forward. "Do you know where the dragons went? Where Igneal is?" But the image had already dissolved, the temple's illumination dimming though not disappearing entirely. The magical framework remained visible, now revealing something they hadn't not iced initially. 7 distinct points within the temple complex where energy concentrated with particular intensity. 7 gates, Lucy murmured, making the connection immediately. Just as the message said. Erza approached one of these focal points cautiously, studying its magical signature without direct contact. "These appear to be anchoring points," she observed. "Stabilizing whatever dimensional framework the temple was designed to maintain. Which explains the fluctuations," Gray added. "If these anchors are failing after centuries, the boundaries they supported would naturally become unstable." Naruto knelt at the dais center, examining the intricate patterns more closely. Unlike the dimensional tear in Shiratsum, this magic felt ordered, purposeful, designed for stability rather than traversal. "This is a containment system," Kurama observed within Naruto's mind. "Not meant to facilitate travel between worlds, but to prevent it, at least in certain directions." "A barrier," Naruto translated for the others. Ryoshin created this temple to maintain separation between specific dimensional planes. "But why?" Lucy questioned. "And what did he mean about the inheritor choosing between restoration or transformation?" "That would be me," Naruto acknowledged, standing as the implications clarified. "As Dragon God Slayer, I've inherited Ryoshin's magic and AP. Apparently his responsibilities regarding these barriers. And the 7 gates," Erza prompted, ever focused on tactical essentials. "Anchor points requiring attention," Naruto reasoned, studying the magical framework connecting them. "The fluctuations we've been tracking are symptoms of their deterioration." Natsu had wandered to another of the focal points, unusually contemplative. So these gates are keeping something out. Or in. It was an astute question that sent an uncomfortable ripple through the group. Containment implied threat, something requiring isolation from their world or others. The temple's age suggests it predates recorded history, Lucy noted. Whatever purpose it served would have been established during the earliest Dragon era, possibly even before human civilization in Earthland. Which means this could relate to threats we have no historical context for, Erza concluded grimly. Beyond even Zirf or Acknowledge. The sobering possibility hung between them. They continued examining the temple's magical systems. After thorough investigation of each focal point, patterns began emerging. Each gate corresponded to a different type of draconic magic, a line with elements and concepts beyond the standard classifications. This one resonates with time manipulation, Lucy observed at the eastern point. Similar to Arc of Time magic but more fundamental. Spatial distortion here, Gray called from the northern section. Creating dimensional pockets rather than just teleportation effects. Soul magic, Erza identified at another point, her expression darkening. Particularly concerning given historical abuses of such power. As they catalogued the 7 magical disciplines represented, a cohesive picture emerged. The temple had been designed to regulate traffic between dimensional planes based on magical categorization, preventing certain types of power from crossing freely between worlds. So Ryoshin created magical immigration control, Natsu summarized with characteristic bluntness. Keeping dangerous magic from world hopping. More specifically, Naruto corrected, understanding deepening as his Dragon God Slayer magic interacted with the temple's systems. Preventing powers that could destabilize reality from concentrating in any single dimension. The day waned as they continued their investigation, sunlight shifting cast the ruins in golden afternoon light. Despite hours of examination, direct action regarding the fluctuations remained unclear. Restoration would require understanding the original magical parameters. While the alternative, transformation, Ryoshin had mentioned remained entirely undefined. We should establish camp, Erza decided pragmatically. Continue investigation tomorrow with fresh perspective. Lucy, your celestial spirits might offer additional insights regarding dimensional boundaries. I can consult Crux specifically, Lucy agreed. His knowledge of celestial history might include information about Dragon-era dimensional regulation. As they prepared a campsite at the temple's edge, Naruto created shadow clones to maintain surveillance around the perimeter, standard shinobi protocol that Erza immediately approved. The familiar routine of camp establishment provided comfortable structure after hours of confronting cosmic mysteries. Natsu's fire magic proved particularly useful as darkness fell, providing both warmth and light without requiring conventional fuel. The Dragon Slayer took childlike pleasure in shaping his flames into elaborate dragon figures that danced above their campfire. Entertaining happy while inadvertently creating a surprisingly peaceful atmosphere. Does it bother you? Lucy asked softly, settling beside Naruto as they watched Natsu's impromptu fire show. Being assigned responsibility for ancient draconic systems you never asked to inherit. The perceptive question deserved honest consideration. It's not the first legacy I've carried without choosing it, Naruto replied after a moment. In my world, I inherited both burden and power from my parents and circumstances. This feels similar in some ways. But on a potentially larger scale, she noted. Interdimensional barriers rather than village politics. Naruto smiled wryly at her understanding. The principles remain consistent. Protect what matters, understand before acting. Find a path that honors both past and future. He glanced toward where Erza methodically organized supplies with military precision. Having the right people alongside you makes the difference, whatever the scale. Lucy followed his gaze, her expression softening knowingly. Erza has that effect, making impossible challenges feel manageable through sheer competence and determination. Eerie Tale generally seems to specialize in the impossible, Naruto observed, watching Gray casually create elaborate ice sculptures while arguing with Natsu about proper campfire management. It's our specialty, Lucy agreed with genuine pride, though usually with more property damage than strictly necessary. Their conversation paused as Erza approached, having completed her organizational tasks with characteristic thoroughness. We should establish a watch rotation, she suggested, seamlessly including Naruto in established team protocols. The temple's activation may attract attention, both scholarly and potentially hostile. My clones can maintain continuous perimeter surveillance, Naruto offered. They'll disperse if threatened, providing immediate alert without risking personnel. Erza considered this modification to standard procedure, then nodded approvingly. Efficient use of your abilities. We'll maintain abbreviated human watches as backup. Magical threats sometimes bypass standard detection methods. The practical discussion of security arrangements felt refreshingly normal amid dimensional mysteries and ancient dragon prophecies. As night settled fully over the canyon, Team Natsu's comfortable camaraderie wrapped around Naruto like a familiar blanket, reminiscent enough of Team 7's better missions to ease homesickness while distinct enough to avoid painful comparison. Later, as most of the team slept and Naruto maintained his assigned watch, he found himself drawn back to the temple's central dais. In darkness, the magical framework glowed more prominent L.Y. golden lines tracing connections between focal points, creating a three-dimensional map of whatever system Ryoshin had established centuries earlier. Trouble sleeping? Erza's voice came quietly from behind him. Naruto turned, unsurprised by her silent approach despite his enhanced senses. Her movement had the efficiency of someone trained to operate undetected when necessary. Just thinking, he replied as she joined him beside the dais. Trying to understand what this means for getting home. Erza nodded, moonlight highlighting her scarlet hair with silver accents. The temple's purpose seems regulatory rather than transitional, maintaining boundaries rather than facilitating crossing. Exactly, Naruto acknowledged, which suggests dimensional travel was never meant to be casual or common, only purposeful and directed. Quote, they stood in comfortable silence for several moments, watching the magical patterns shift subtly above the ancient stones. Without discussion, both recognized the implications for Naruto's situation. Returning to his dimension would require special circumstances rather than conventional magical methods. When I first arrived in Earthland, Naruto said finally, getting home was my only priority. But now, you're considering alternatives, Erza finished when he paused. Not a question but an observation, free from judgment or presumption. Is that betraying my world? He asked softly, finding meaning here while they might still be searching for me there. It was a vulnerability he'd shared with no one else. Not Makarov, not Murajan, not even Kurama, who experienced his thoughts directly. Yet with Erza, the question emerged naturally, without deliberation. Her response came with characteristic directness, tempered by unexpected gentleness. Honor doesn't demand eternal displacement from purpose. It requires making meaning wherever you stand. Her eyes met his with perfect understanding. Your loyalty to Konoha isn't diminished by finding value in fairy tale. The simple wisdom struck deeper than elaborate philosophical arguments could have. Erza understood because she'd faced similar choices, between past and present, between loyalty to memory and engagement with reality. Ryoshin said you walked a parallel path, Naruto noted. I'm beginning to understand why. Something shifted in Erza's expression, a momentary softening had revealed glimpses of the person beneath the armor, both literal and figurative. We carry different burdens from different worlds, but perhaps with similar purpose. Before Naruto could respond, a distant explosion shattered the night's stillness, originating beyond the temple complex but near enough to illuminate the canyon walls with momentary brilliance. Simultaneously, one of Naruto's perimeter shadow clones dispersed, sending memories of intruders approaching from the eastern access trail. Multiple magical signatures, he reported instantly, shinobi training engaging automatically. Organized movement patterns suggesting coordinated approach. My clone was discovered by advanced scouts. Erza re-equipped into Heaven's Wheel armor with fluid efficiency, already moving toward their campsite. Wake the others. Defensive positions around the temple core. No further discussion needed, they separated to execute the response with practiced coordination despite having worked together only briefly. Within moments, Team Natsu had assembled at strategic positions throughout the temple complex, Natsu's enhanced senses confirming approaching hostiles while Gray established ice fortifications at vulnerable access points. At least 15 distinct magical signatures, Lucy reported, keys ready as she maintained visual contact with the eastern approach. Professional movement patterns, not typical bandits or opportunists. Quote, Crimson Fang reinforcements. Gray suggested, remembering their encounter in Shiratsum. Negative, Naruto countered, processing clone memories. Different magical signatures, more disciplined. Less chaotic. Military precision rather than dark guild fanaticism. The assessment proved accurate as the intruders emerged from the canyon shadows, figures in matching gray uniforms. Moving with coordinated efficiency that spoke of professional training. Their leader, a tall woman with silver hair pulled into a severe bun, raised a hand to halt their advance. Approximately 50 meters from the temple perimeter. Fairy tale wizards, she called, her voice carrying clearly across the distance. This is Special Operations Unit 7 of the Magic Council's Containment Division. You were ordered to withdraw from the temple complex immediately. Erza stepped forward as Team Natsu's senior member, maintaining combat readiness while engaging diplomatically. We operate under council authorization, investigating magical fluctuations on direct assignment from Master Makarov in coordination with Council Research Division. The commander's expression remained impassive. Your authorization has been superseded by direct order from Chairman Grand Doma. This site is now under Containment Division jurisdiction following classification as a dimensional hazard zone. That's convenient timing, Natsu muttered suspiciously, right after we activate the temple and learn about the 7 gates. The observation wasn't without merit. The Council's sudden appearance immediately following significant discoveries suggested either remarkable coincidence or concerning surveillance. We'll need verification of these orders, Erza responded, maintaining professional courtesy while establishing appropriate procedural requirements. The commander signaled to an aide, who approached with formal documentation bearing the Council's official seal. Erza accepted ND reviewed it thoroughly before responding. These appear legitimate, she acknowledged. However, our mission parameters specifically include cataloging all findings before withdrawal. We require minimal time to complete documentation of discoveries made within the temple complex. It was a reasonable request within regulatory frameworks, one the commander would need legitimate justification to deny. Her hesitation suggested competing directives beyond simple site security. You have 1 hour, she conceded finally. Under observation. No further activation of temple systems will be permitted. Erza nodded acceptance of these terms, though Naruto detected subtle tension in her posture, professional compliance masking strategic assessment. As council operatives established a perimeter around the temple, Team Natsu regrouped near the central dais. This isn't standard procedure, Lucy whispered, keeping her voice below detection threshold. Council intervention at this level usual. Why follows extensive preliminary investigation, not immediate military response. They knew exactly when to arrive, Gray agreed. Almost like they were waiting for the temple's activation specifically. Natsu's expression darkened with characteristic suspicion of authority. They want whatever's here, probably knew about it all along. While his teammates discussed council motivations, Naruto focused on the operatives themselves, analyzing movement patterns, equipment, and magical signatures with shinobi precision. What he observed confirmed his initial assessment. These were containment specialists. Not researchers or general enforcement. Their presence suggested fear of release rather than desire for acquisition. They're afraid, he concluded quietly. Not interested in the temple's knowledge but concerned about what it might unleash if fully activated. Erza nodded subtle agreement. Their positioning focuses on suppression capability rather than study or extraction. Consistent. With containment protocols for potential threats. So what do we do? Lucy asked practically. We have limited time before forced withdrawal. Document everything, Erza decided. Particularly He 7 focal points and their magical signatures. Naruto, your connection to the temple systems provides unique insights the council may lack. Observations from your perspective are highest priority. The directive made strategic sense, preserving critical information while maintaining procedural compliance. As Team Natsu dispersed to record different aspects of the temple complex, Naruto approached the central dais once more. Conscious of council operatives watching his every movement, the dragon god slayer magic within him resonated strongly with the ancient systems, communication beyond words or conventional magical interaction. Placing his hands on the inscribed surface, he allowed that resonance to deepen, seeking understanding that might survive their imminent removal from the site. Images and concepts flowed into his consciousness, fragmentary but meaningful. 7 magical domains requiring balance. Boundaries established to prevent catastrophic concentration of power within any single dimension. Cyclical weakening requiring periodic renewal by one carrying Ryoshin's blood and magic. And beneath these operational parameters, something more personal, a sense of responsibility. Tai passed from the dragon god to his inheritors, an obligation transcending individual worlds or timelines. Not merely maintaining barriers but understanding why they existed, when they should be preserved. And when evolution might require transformation instead. As Naruto absorbed these impressions, he became aware of intensified scrutiny from the council commander herself, who had approached to observe his interaction with the dais more closely. Dragon God Slayer, she stated quietly, confirming knowledge beyond what had been openly shared. The council has records regarding your arrival in Earthland and subsequent magical development. Naruto maintained neutral expression despite surprise at this direct acknowledgement. Then you understand why this temple responds to my presence specifically. We understand enough to recognize the danger, she replied, voice pitched for his enhanced hearing alone. These systems were established for profound purpose, one beyond typical magical regulation or research objectives. Which is why containment specialists were dispatched rather than scholars, Naruto concluded. The commander's gaze sharpened with reassessment. You're more perceptive than typical guild wizards. Military background. Something like that, Naruto acknowledged, recognizing professional recognition between those trained in similar disciplines despite different worlds. Then understand this, she continued, maintaining operational discretion. The council doesn't fear knowledge but consequences. Whatever decisions you make regarding these systems will have implications beyond fairy tale or even fury. The warning carried genuine concern rather than bureaucratic intimidation, one professional acknowledging another's jurisdiction while emphasizing broader responsibility. Before Naruto could respond, Erza approached, marking the conclusion of their documentation hour. We've completed essential recording, she informed the commander formally. Team Natsu will withdraw as ordered, with full documentation submitted to both Master Makarov and Council Research Division. The commander nodded acceptance, maintaining appropriate professional boundaries during the team's efficient camp breakdown and preparation for departure. As they gathered their equipment, Naruto created shadow clones to assist, noting with interest that while the council operatives observed this technique with evident curiosity, none appeared surprised by its execution. Their departure from the temple complex proceeded without incident, council personnel maintaining CTFUL distance while ensuring complete withdrawal. As Team Natsu ascended the canyon trail toward the upper rim, Naruto glanced back at the ancient ruins, now surrounded by magical barriers being established by council specialists. They're sealing it completely, Gray observed. Beyond standard containment protocols, which means they knew its significance before we arrived, Erza concluded. Investigation likely triggered contingency plans already prepared for this specific site. The implications raised troubling questions about the council's prior knowledge and decision to allow Fairy Tail's investigation initially. Had they anticipated the temple's response to Naruto specifically? Used Team Natsu as activation catalysts for systems they couldn't influence directly. We need to report everything to Master Makarov immediately, Lucy decided as they reached the canyon rim. Including the council's unusual response. And figure out what 7 gates actually means, Natsu added with uncharacteristic seriousness. Because if the council's this worried, it's definitely important. As they began the journey back toward civilization, Naruto found himself contemplating Ruo Shin's cryptic message and the choice presented between restoration and transformation. Whatever the ancient dragon had established this system to contain or regulate clearly remained relevant enough to warrant modern intervention, suggesting that dimensional boundaries weren't merely theoretical concerns but practical necessities. The dragon god slayer magic within him had responded to the temple's systems with recognition rather than discovery, awakening inherited knowledge rather than learning something new. That distinction carried significant implications regarding his role in whatever was unfolding across dimensions. Troubled thoughts, Erza inquired quietly as they walked side by side, the others slightly ahead discussing theories about council motivations. Wondering about inherited responsibilities, Naruto admitted. And whether understanding them requires embracing them or questioning them. Erza considered this philosophical dilemma with characteristic thoughtfulness. Perhaps both simultaneously. Honor what came before while considering what should come after. The balanced perspective reflected what Naruto had always valued in Konoha's better leaders: respect for tradition without being constrained by it, willingness to protect established systems while remaining open to necessary evolution. Ryoshin offered choice between restoration and transformation, he noted. Maybe that's the point. Not predetermined outcome but meaningful decision based on understanding both past purpose and present reality. A perspective worthy of both a Hokage and a fairy tale wizard. Erza observed with subtle warmth. Carrying multiple traditions while forging your own path between them. The validation, coming from someone who embodied similar balanced strength, settled. Something within Naruto that had remained unsettled since his displacement. Whatever dimensional gates required attention, whatever choice awaited regarding restoration or transformation, the path forward would reflect both worlds that had shaped him rather than requiring abandonment of either. As Team Natsu continued their journey toward Rockfall Station, the setting sun cast long shadows across Dragonfall Canyon behind them, ancient ruins now under modern guard, dimensional boundaries maintained through changing methods across centuries, inherited responsibilities passing to new generations through unexpected channels. And within Naruto, Dragon God Slayer magic continued integrating with his fundamental nature, not erasing the shinobi he had been but evolving into something that honored both his origins and his current reality. A transformation not of replacement but of integration, much like the choice Ryoshin had presented regarding the Seven Gates themselves. Whatever awaited regarding those ancient systems, he would face it as both Naruto of Konoha and Naruto of Fairy Tail, the Dragon God Slayer walking a path between worlds rather than confined to either. And beside him walked companions who, despite knowing him only briefly, had demonstrated the kind of acceptance and support that transcended dimensional boundaries. Particularly the scarlet-haired warrior whose parallel path seemed increasingly entwined with his own, her presence a constant reminder that displacement need not mean isolation, that new bonds could strengthen rather than replace the connections that had defined him before. As night fell across the landscape, the Dragon God Slayer looked toward stars that, while arranged in unfamiliar patterns, nonetheless illuminated a path forward with surprising clarity. Whatever seven gates awaited his attention, he would approach them not as burden but as purpose, one shared with companions who made even cosmic responsibility feel manageable through shared strength and unwavering loyalty. The journey back to Magnolia would bring new questions, but also the certainty that whatever answers emerged, they would be faced together, as Fairy Tail had faced every challenge before, with determination, camaraderie, and the absolute conviction that bonds forged through shared purpose could overcome even dimensional boundaries. Chapter 3 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.